we're here. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Benebell. Hello, everybody joining us today, tonight, depending on where you are in the world. I'm so excited to be sitting here with Benebell Wen. Benebell, you're a huge, I think, just influence and contributor to our community, and I'm so grateful you took the time because I just want to chit chat and kind of hang out.
I do too. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I figure everything's pretty much on the table. I feel like we can talk about creations, we can talk about your work, we can talk about play. I'm down for all
You
of it.
take the lead. I go where you go.
Beautiful. I love it. Hello to Fairlight, Tarot, and Nicole and Collie Countess. Are you able to see comments, Benebell, on your side?
Oh, there we are. I am now just by clicking a button.
Perfect.
Hi,
So,
everyone.
Hey, so you all feel free. This is a casual hangout. What we're doing today, because this is a new thing here on the channel, is we're going to have a cozy chat here in member space, but be aware that this will be going public as a replay in about a week or so. So just be aware anything you share here will be going out in a publicly replayable video. So keep that in mind. To those of you who are watching later, thanks for hanging out with all of us. And if you have comments, drop them down below. But if you guys in the chat have questions, feel free to throw questions at us, topics you want us to chit chat about. We're here to hang. The one thing I didn't ask you ahead of time, Benebell, is if you have sort of a wrap up time you want to be closed up by. Hi.
No, I am all yours for as long as you need me.
Oh, that's dangerous. No. Well, just wave the white flag. You need to bail at any point. Um, Peggy says when you start falling asleep, I'll let you go. So, I might miss the cue if you're not real obvious about it. So just holler for help. It's so great to see all of you in the chat. I would love to actually, if we could just kind of go back in time a little bit, because when I came on to sort of the tarot tube, into the tarot tube world, you had already been doing stuff. Like you'd written this big, gigantic book, but this wasn't your first book, right? You
It
wrote
was
something
my
before
first
this.
book. No, that was my
This
first
was
book.
your first
Book
book?
number one. Yeah.
So I had it in my head that Tao of Craft came first, but this was before Tao of Craft?
Tao of Craft was my sophomore book. So that came out 2015. And then Tao of Craft came out 2016. But I feel like it was even longer because it took so long for a Holistic Tarot to go through the publishing phase. So I wrote it, I finished it around 2010. And then it was
Dang.
just, so it felt like a really long time because by the time it was out in stores, I was like kind of already over it. It was just really funny to do
That's
marketing for.
valid. I understand that.
Right? Like everyone's talking about this brand new book. I'm like, but I want to talk about Tao of Craft because that was new in my, yeah, it was just a really funny situation.
That's an interesting point because actually I spent some time over the weekend. I was hanging out with Don Michelle and Danny. We were out in West Palm Beach doing StarCon, and one of the things we all talked about is what it feels like. And I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on this when you create something, especially something this massive, and you get to the point where now it's kind of out in the world, but you've been with it for so long that by the time it comes out, you're kind of like done and dusted. I'm moving on to new stuff. How does that feel as a creator to navigate the space where you've kind of, in a way, energetically moved on, but this is now just coming into being? How do you, how?
You fake it. I mean, like, it's really hard because I remember, like, going to events and people wanting to talk about the book, and I'm like, "I'm over it, like, I'm done." But then you can't
I'm
say
done.
that because it's not right, so you have to kind of fake it. It sounds so
Kind
awful
of
to
fake
say,
it.
but that I don't have
No,
a canned answer prepared. I'm not faking it very well right now, but, like, it's just really true,
no, don't
you
fake it. We're
know?
good.
Yeah, you just
It
have to put on your, like, fake voice, that chirpiness, and be like, "Yeah," and you gotta just try to sell it and, like, do your little dance, It's just
and kind of
dance monkey.
transport yourself into the time when you were like
Yeah,
birthing it.
yes, yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure you hear this all, I know you hear this all the time because I've seen you hear it all the time, but this amount of writing is like overwhelmingly intimidating to many of us. But what I love is that you manage to you what I admire is that you are clearly walking a path where you want to put your creations out in the world the way that you envision them. And I think as somebody who is learning to put my things out in the world like at all, the way that you sort of, I think you seem to guard your creative vision very closely. And I don't think that's particularly easy in this environment. So when you saw how like massive this was, what were your thoughts? Were like, whatever, just stick it out and see what happens? Or were you nervous that it was going to be too much? Like, what was
I
that
just
like?
put it out there. So I think for me, I don't know what it might be. I think it's just being I think for me, because I didn't need to put food on the table and pay my bills with
Yeah.
the book. And
Yeah.
so that's freeing, but I don't want to say that either because I want people to be able to, I wish that people could make a living off writing. So it's really hard to
Yeah.
balance that. But I think it was liberating to not have to, pay the bills with a book. And so
Yeah.
it could be exactly as is, whatever I want it to be. And if a publisher didn't want to buy it, well, F you too. Like I didn't need you, it'd
Yeah.
be nice to work with
Yeah.
the publisher, but if you don't want it as is, I can move on. And quote unquote, worst case scenario, I can self-publish. And at that point, I was okay with that option as well. And so because that was such a liberating position to be in, I could just hawk it as whatever it is. And yes, this is a 270,000 word book on the tarot. And if you don't want to publish it, and a lot of publishers did not want to publish it, that's fine. Thank you for your time. I'll find somebody who will, or I will at some point later on just self-publish it. So that's kind of how I felt. And even with the SKT, because I cared so much that it was creatively 100% what I wanted. And I didn't want any other
Yeah.
external third-party influence whatsoever, right down to even how packaging is designed, how it was marketed, book description, deck description, because how you don't really have a lot of control over that. And so I didn't
Yeah.
want to go the route of traditional publishing for something that was, to me, my great work, something that really represented who I was as a person, my soul, my essence. And so that's why I
Yeah.
self-published.
Yeah. It's funny because the first book I wrote, I self-published. And it wasn't even a question to me of I didn't know anything about the publishing world. So to me, it wasn't a question even of um I guess reach, or I wasn't thinking like that. For me, my first book, the self-worth path, that was me taking my heart, the heart and soul that lies underneath everything I do, putting it in a book form. And so that was like my baby. My first book was like my baby. And I was like, well, I want to put it out self-published because I just knew I wanted control over how long it stayed in print. That was like my number
Mm.
one thing, was like, I want it to be available forever. I don't care if it makes no money. I wanted to just sit out there and exist, because it felt like it was like me wrapping up so much of the stuff that I'd done for so long and so much of my like passion in one place, that I didn't want to risk it going away. Now I know now, at least I don't know if this is always true, but I believe if a publisher stops publishing your book or your product, your deck, whatever, that at a certain point the rights revert to you and you could then self-publish. But I didn't know that then. I was like, am I selling away my rights? And then it could just go out of print and I'm not in control. So that was my first book. But like I think like you with UJT, I took it to a publisher because the idea of self-publishing was terrifying to me. A deck, specifically a deck. Even though I wanted to like be in control of the cardstock and the packaging and all these things, I was super scared. Seemed really complicated. But I took it to a publisher and they came back with a we want to work with you, but not this project kind of answer. And I was like, okay. But it was such a blessing because now that I have gone through a publisher and done my first book, which has been for me a marvelous experience, that lack of control for my tarot deck would not have been a good fit at all. So I totally get that on that front, I guess I'll say. And I think what you said really resonates, this idea of like writing something like this, knowing that it doesn't have to pay your bills, does open up a different kind of freedom. And I completely get that's like a privileged place to
Yeah.
be in, but I was in the same space. Like I wasn't writing, same thing with my tarot book. I wasn't writing it wasn't about making a living. It was about, oh, I want to put this out into the world and just let it have life in whatever way it's going to have life, which is amazing. But I look at something like this and I'm like, okay, I mean, my book was, I don't know, 65,000 words or something. 4 of my books in here worth of word content. And this is how you work, it seems to be. You like going these deep dives into content. Is that true outside of tarot as well?
It's everywhere. I think I just tend to be very
Yeah.
verbose. Even, for example, work emails, I've had to learn so I write the email draft and then I have to sit there for like 2 hours to bring it down from like 6 paragraphs to 2 sentences. And so I find that that's always been who I am. And so that's not always a good thing. And so I have to very actively
Yeah.
consciously reduce my word count in a lot of contexts, in a lot of instances. For something like creative nonfiction, for something that's my passion, I don't have to do that, right? It's exactly the quote unquote unfiltered version of who I am. You're really seeing my style, how my mind works, how I process information. But in a lot of real world contexts, you obviously can't do
You
that.
have
You
to
have
like
to, yes, exactly.
contain it.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
executive is going to read 6 paragraphs.
I legitimately do the same thing. And like, as you've seen with the way I message, I don't often sit there and like reduce, like if I'm doing work emails, I have to do the same thing though.
Yep.
I have to go through, and especially if I'm feeling heated about anything or passionate or excited, that's when it's really hard for me to shrink the words. Like to the point where Peggy and I will have conversations because it's like I'm getting worked up about something. She's like, "You need to let me read this before you send it and help you like not do the thing with just all of these words all
Yes.
at once." But it's interesting because you can see that like whatever topic, you know, and I don't have a copy of your I Ching book yet, but I have seen it and it looks like a similarly deep
Yeah,
dive. And
it's
you,
the same size as it's bigger
yeah,
than holistic tarot,
is
actually.
it bigger? Is
Yeah.
it thicker than Holistic Tarot? That's amazing. But with that, you actually did you translate? Re- ex- do you mind telling me again? I know you've told me before, but I have the
No, no,
memory
no.
of a goldfish.
I translated the I Ching Book of Changes, but that's actually pretty small. So it's only about that much of
Oh,
the book. And then what I did was I deep dived into the history, the origins of it, the legends, the mythology of it. And then also I annotated the I Ching, which means I go, so this word is here because it means this. This is a history of how this word evolved. This is the etymological origins of this word. This is why
I
this
love
word is
that.
here. Or like there are certain, because it's such an old, it's a 4,000-year-old book. And so a lot, it's always been used in Taoist mysticism. So a lot of the verses are popularly used in incantations and spells and meditations. So I'll point that out. Oh, this is often used in exorcisms. This is often used as a purification incantation. And so that, kept ballooned and ballooned and ballooned. Before you knew it, it was like 3,000 something words.
Dang. Okay. That's amazing. I have a question from Fairlight Tarot. So this is Sylvia. Sylvia asks, when did you first start working on the Spirit Keepers Tarot, the first edition? And what inspired you?
I think it was 2017 or 2018. And at the time, I wanted to create a completely hand-drawn deck. So it was going to be just one copy of a deck. I would hand draw all 78 cards, cut it out of cardstock, and create my own tarot deck. And then I would just use that tarot deck for myself. So it would be completely my own. And so that's how I
Yeah.
started drawing. And then I started drawing the cards. I finished the majors. And in fact, I had no intention of publishing it or marketing it or anything because I uploaded all 22 images onto the internet for free. It was like, here for free download, right? And then
I
I
remember
continued
that.
drawing, right? Now, right before I was about to cut it, like literally start physically cutting it into cards to start playing with it, James, my husband, came in and was like, oh, these are really good. And so he got the idea of like, you should publish it. I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, I don't know, like it's black and white. There's just these like pen drawn images. No one's going to publish it because I knew enough about the marketing in the industry to know that this isn't really marketable. And so I'm like, we would have to go the route of self-publishing. And he's like, well, we can do that. We'll just like buy like 500 copies. And if no one wants it, we'll keep 500 copies. And so that's kind of how it evolved. But yes, it was around 2018. I finished all 78 cards in like 2 or 3 months because that was all I was doing. I was obsessively working on it. I kind of created a magical container out of my room. I did all of these things. I created like, the ward, all of that. And so made my own space. And I think it actually worked in terms of creating a shelter because even my husband, James, rarely came in. And so I was like, oh my God, I kind of felt like it really blocked out
You have a
everybody.
bubble.
Yeah, I really created like a magical bubble and just contained all of the magic within it to create the 78 cards.
Now, I might be pulling this out of my butt. I don't know, but I seem to remember you talking about at one point, it was almost like the channeling is not the right word, but there was some sort of connecting work maybe you were doing with like Crowley
Mhm.
and Wait. Am I
Yeah.
remembering that right?
Yeah, that's 100%. Yep, that's what I did. Yeah. So
That was amazing.
from my perspective, in my reality, my self-generated created reality, I invoked them and had these like full-on
Invoke.
conversations and discourse with them about how to synthesize their different points of view and create something that still departed from what they did and was my own, and I could call it my own, but then at the same
Yeah.
time, magically was an inheritance of both of their works. And because they are diametrically so different, how do you create something from such diametrically different perspectives? So
Yeah,
yes.
like how do you syncretize these two
Right.
energies? And because I think this gets lost, especially since the first edition, I feel like this has kind of faded more into the background. And if you're open to it, I'd love to bring it back to the foreground a little bit. But can you tell me a little bit more about the animistic side of Spirit Keepers Tarot?
Yeah, so I believe that we all have chi, right? And then objects, things
Hmm.
have chi, and then alchemy, when you combine things in certain patterns, when you combine things in combinations with sound, invocations, petitions, timing, astrology, which is space and time, when you combine all of these different aspects, everything that has chi, there's some kind of alchemy that happens that the sum becomes greater than the parts, and that net
Yeah.
access is magic. And so if you can
Yeah.
find a way to take that net access and channel it into something and encode it into ink or encode it into something that becomes in a fixed state like paper, like artwork, then that artwork itself becomes enchanted and becomes something magical. And then I was thinking how, but every time you make a photocopy of it, it takes away from the magic, right? So
Hmm.
you have, so ground zero is the most powerful, but you need to make it so powerful that every single replica of it, every time you print it, every copy of it still retains enough magic that it's on a standalone by itself still is, independently powerful. So how do you start
Yeah.
with ground zero that's powerful enough that no matter how, and then have the number of copies of it. So that's why the print run mattered to me. If you looked at every single print run, it was very, very intentional. The number, the numerology, all of it was very intentional because I was thinking about like that animistic aspect of how to channel and then fix chi or power into each individual copy of a tarot deck.
Yeah. So you wanted to infuse so many layers of like esoteric power, meaning, etc.,
Mhm.
that it would carry through even despite the multiple copies that come forward,
Right.
which is
And
so
then on
interesting.
multiple dimensions as well. So for example, when you're looking at the third and final copy, what I wanted to do was work with the power of culture and history. And so then you bring in
Hmm.
powers of culture and history in addition to the chi or the power that the occult practitioner does to the actual crafting of the design. So now it's coming from multiple dimensions where the power is being sourced from.
Each individual edition has had such a different feeling and vibe. And the third edition, you made a video that I think you called In Search of the Pictus Sophia. Is that the right term?
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
thinking.
yeah, yeah, uh-huh. I forgot the word. Oh
Okay.
my God, my brain's been blinking out because I've been doing Taoist magic for so long. But yes, yeah, something like that.
So yeah, and what
Prisca
struck me
theologia,
about that
Prisca
video,
theologia. Uh-huh.
what is it? Chris?
Prisca theologia.
Yes, okay, yes. I don't know where I got Sophia, but it's this the way it struck me in the video was this idea of all of the world's sort of theologies and religion and history and mythology sort of looking for the common thread in a way between all of these things and trying to maybe I don't know if syncretize is the right word, but harmonize for sure. That's what I got from that video. Does that feel like what you were trying to do with the last edition, the Revelation?
Yeah, and I think what's really funny is so there's ways to talk about that, right? So for example, I do find that the artwork, the style can be not light and fluffy, but there is a lightness and a fluffiness to it. But then if you think about what is the universal message in every single religion and what is it that is the common denominator in any path that is about transcendence? Love, compassion, empathy, charity. And so I was like, oh, like the core essence, the common denominator is very, very light and fluffy. But I mean, not you can say it that way, but also it is something obviously very profound. But yeah, I
Yeah.
really worked with that. And I think it came through in the way the style of the third edition is. It does have that like really light and like loving, empathetic, charitable type of energy to it because that is the core essence of every single path to transcendence.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was thinking about it when I saw that video and I was like, wow, it when I watched it, it finally dawned on me, and I don't know how I'd missed this. Like I'd caught that the Crowley and weight thing during the creation, but I hadn't caught the bit. And maybe this was I don't think this was new for Revelation. I'm thinking out loud, but basically, one thing that stood out to me from that video was you talked about the concept of a spirit keeper's tarot being that if every card embodies a singular sort of energy individually in a way. What you've created is not one unit with one energy necessarily, but rather a collective that
Mhm.
is being managed and handled by the user of the deck. Does that
Yeah.
sound like I'm even in line
No,
with
no, it's
the
100%
intention?
making that sound like this is such an exciting conversation. I feel like you know so much about my tarot deck, and I usually don't get this. Usually people, I mean, I'm not expecting people to do research or anything, but yeah, so I'm really glad
No.
and excited for this conversation. But yeah, I feel like a spirit keeper, it's almost like it's like a menagerie of spirits, but then it's also because we ourselves are very diverse internally as, you're not just one, you're not a one single monolithic note in terms of your personality. And even who you are will depend on how you're reacting to your environment and who the other person is that you're interacting with. And so I kind of feel that way with spirit interactions as well. And so, yes, it is basically 78 or 80, different aspects of soul, aspects of spirit. So it is a collective of spirits.
It is a collective. And here's the really fascinating thing. So I've had a journey with this deck, and I'm just gonna tell you real quick. So when I got my first Spirit Keepers, the first edition Spirit Keepers Tarot, the original black and white, this was like my treasure. I couldn't let anybody else touch it, and it felt like really I felt really bonded with it. And then something happened. It was like the door closed, it was done, and I was like, what? And then I didn't get it. It was like my brain shut down about it. I ended up rehoming that original first edition. The sepia toned one came out, and I was like, well, I don't know what happened. Like, maybe it's just not there anymore. Then I got the Revelation edition, and it sat in its box, and it was not for me. So it's such a strange thing for me. I've never had this experience with any other deck. And then I rehomed that one. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? But I kept the Book of Maps because I'm like, this is a treasure trove of information. And someday I'm going to read the whole thing. And then actually this last weekend, I was getting together with Danny and Dawn, and Danny had her copy of Revelation, and she had that experience of it like not connecting. And I was like, if you're not keeping it, I don't know why. I was just like drawn right back to it. And I got it in my hands, and it felt like a brand new deck, like totally different than anything I've held before. Cannot explain it. And it's why I think I went looking for this whole thing around when she said she was bringing it for me, and I was just like, this, I just feel drawn to it again. And that was what led me to that video. And I'm like, wait a minute. I feel as though almost, th- this is going to sound so silly. I feel like the right copy had to find its way to me.
Hmm. I think
And
so
now I'm
too.
sitting here like it feels like a totally different thing. And then just to piggyback, and I've got your guys' questions started. I promise I won't forget. But somebody said, how do you select the orders to assign to each copy? And here, let me put this up. This is Sylvia. Mine was the Order of the Warrior, and it resonated so much. And I don't think this one says an order, so I don't even know. Does it say on the certificate usually?
Oh, this is which edition? Let me see the
Oh, good
front message.
question. This is this one.
I can't remember. Oh, which one was that one? Let me go.
So this is what
Oh, first edition. No, so that one didn't have the 8 orders yet.
the orders was the second edition of Revelation.
Yes, the 8 immortal
Gotcha.
orders. Yep.
Yeah, so I was curious, but I saw that in the video and I was like, oh, what is that? So interesting. So how did you determine all of that with the
Numerology,
orders?
mathematics. It's all 100% mathematics. And so the 8 orders is based on the Bagua 8 trigrams. And so you already have the calculus of the I Ching 64 hexagrams. So I just leaned
Yeah.
into the calculus of how the hexagrams and the 8 trigrams work. And then so I did the numerology of the number of copies in advance, obviously. And then you sort it into the 8. And then the numerology of the number matches with the number of the order. So there's 8 orders, right? And so one of them is always assigned 1, one of them is assigned 5, and then the one is assigned 8. So it's 1 through 8. And so that's
Gotcha.
and then you just sort it 1 through 8 like that, and then you get all of the copies into the 8 orders.
And why was the orders important to you for this for that second edition of the Revelation?
Um, well, there are a couple of things. I think on a mundane level, I was working on the I Ching Book of Changes at that time, and so my brain was all about everything I Ching. And so then I was working on the second print run of the deck, and also working on getting my third book, the I Ching book, out into the world. So I was like, oh, let me just
Yeah.
find a way to integrate it into that. And so there was that aspect of it. But I just thought that was really interesting because there's this idea that these 8 archetypes, the eight immortal orders, are also based on 8 aspects of of magical practice. And you have all of these things in
Ah,
Taoist mysticism that is ordered or classified into the eight, like the eight powers, the eight immortals, eight aspects of everything, eight archetypes that any occultist will want to master, eight different types of practice. And so I thought it'd be really
yeah.
cool to use the eight archetypes. It's already been established in one tradition and find a way to convert it into a tarot tradition. So that's kind of where it came from.
Very cool. I'm a big fan of systems in general. Like
Yeah.
the way again, I was talking about this with other creatives over the past week or so, and it was so interesting to compare notes on how people create. Like both Danny and Don were talking about creating from a more, I think, organic place. And for me, I feel like I start with a system. I start with some sort of structure or concept, and then I sort of build that out. And then the creativity can layer on top of that. But for me, the systems and the structures come first. Do you find that you work that way, or are you more like back and forth, or do you start from the organic place and then add the structure?
I think both, and probably come from it at both ends, and it meets somewhere in the middle. And I think that any really well crafted engine of any kind is going to be a little bit of both. And so I think the reason we want to
Yeah.
start with a system is because anything that you create that's a standalone universe is itself going to be a very well organized, perfected system, just like every, as above, so
Yeah.
below, as within, so without. So everything in itself as a microcosm is a perfected system. So one way to kind of ensure that you're creating something really, really perfected is to start with the concept of a system, because that's kind of how all
Right.
aspects of universal design is built on. But I also think that we're really intuitive, and the creator in us, that capital C, you can start with something, you can let your intuition lead you and psychically still build a perfected system without having to be so
Yeah.
rational based. So I think an intuitive,
Yeah.
creative, artistic approach can still get you to the scientific result, but you just don't realize it. We have that like sense of scientific clock baked into us.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. Gigi asks if you are planning to reprint the Spirit Keeper's Tarot in the future.
Probably many, many years from now, not anytime soon. So right now, I want to at some point finish the Atea deck and then, print a couple of editions of the Atea and then see where I go from there. But I won't be bringing back the SKT anytime soon.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes, and I wonder if you've ever experienced this, if you feel when you create a body of work like the Spirit Keeper's Tarot, especially one that's in demand and people want to see keep coming back, especially when you had and I know you had an initial vision of one and done, that's it. And then it's like you've allowed it to evolve, which I
Yeah.
think already takes a stretch, sometimes creatively outside of comfort zone. Do you sometimes feel like that project has boxed you in a way or kind of backed you into a corner creatively? Where do you
I
sit with
don't
that?
think it has boxed me in creatively, but I mean, even something like, when you self-publish a deck physically, your house is like there's just evidence that you are selling a deck wherever you go. Like it just takes up space. 3,000
Mhm.
tarot decks is a lot of space. It's just everywhere. And then you need the boxes for it, you need the wrappings for it. Like it's just everywhere. And so I kind of feel like that physical like a reminder of it everywhere you turn,
Reminder.
like maybe the answer to your question was yes, it does box you in, because wherever you turn, you have like it's in your face that you're creating a tarot deck, that you're working on it. And also you can't, it's almost like it's holding you down in a way because you can't escape from it.
Mhm.
Every week you have to go to the post office. Every week somebody's deck is lost in the mail and you're like hunting it down, you're calling France, like it's like every week there's something going on with the mailing or shipping or processing of the tarot deck. And then you have to constantly consecrate, doing the oils, packaging it, all of that. And so yeah, I kind of wanted to take a kind of cut away from it for a little bit and not have anything at all to do with the SKT. Like it's out there, it is what it is. I'm not,
Get a
going
breather.
through oils at like, under the full moonlight every single time there's a
Oh,
full moon. I'm not like, packing decks. I'm not waiting in line at the post office. So yeah, I needed a break.
yeah, that's valid. I
Right?
knew going in, I don't even have the physical space to bring in decks in my apartment. Like it's just we're too small. It wasn't going to happen. So I had to sort of get ahead of some of those things and plan ahead. Okay, so I knew I was going to use a fulfillment center even if strictly speaking I didn't need it. It was more a matter of like sanity. Like I need to have a system in place so that once it's there, I have a smooth running system for getting this deck out to people. For me, the my personal touch goes into all the other stages, but the amount of personal attention every single copy of your deck has gotten is, I think, truly remarkable and really, really special. And I'm glad for your sake, I think, for what you were trying to accomplish, that you never had to back off from that. And it sounds like your decision is like, let's take a break instead. Let's take a step back and like let me be away from this for a while because it's so intensive. But you also never really sacrificed the vision in order to make it livable for you, which I think is pretty admirable. It's amazing, actually. We got a question earlier. It's totally off topic, so I want to go back to it.
Sure.
What is your favorite drink? So we're talking morning drink and or evening drink, preferably both.
Yeah, I was like,
What are
can
your
you define
favorites?
drink first? What's the scope of
Yes.
the like what do you mean?
Anything. This can be adult beverages, non-adult beverages, caffeinated, not caffeinated.
Like, that's
How do you
so
start your
hard.
day?
Like, I like every okay, so, I love coffee. Oh, I'm addicted to coffee. I need my coffee. I love tea, all kinds of tea, but I really like alcohol, like, of course, I'm
Yeah.
tempered with it, but, I really like a stiff drink. I think, single malt whiskey.
Really? Like straight, like on ice
Yeah,
kind of thing?
it's great. Yeah,
Oh my
no
God, I'm
ice, just
such
like
a
good.
wimp. I cannot. I cannot. It has to be girly and like de-alcoholized. I
I
drink like
like that
Malibu.
too.
It's like 20% alcohol. It's pathetic. What about wine? Are you a red or white?
I'm a red. I much prefer red wines. But whenever I'm out socializing, I drink only white because you don't want your teeth to get all stained while you're trying to hobnob with people. So I've learned that when
Oh,
you're in a
thoughtful.
but yeah, in social settings, only drink white. But then like with friends or at home, I love red.
Oh, I only drink red, but I never really thought about that. That's a really good point. But okay, when it comes to white then, when you're drinking white out and about, is there a particular type you will go for?
Um, if there's a white Zinfandel, if they have a Riesling, I always go for the Riesling because I prefer Riesling. I feel
Yeah.
like it's a little bit more consistent. A lot of the other
Yeah.
stuff, it can be really like inconsistent. You never know if it's going to be good. So yeah,
Yeah.
I guess Riesling I
Valid.
like. I don't mind the white Zinfandel. Yeah, that's about for whites. And then reds, Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh yeah. I like Shiraz
Shiraz is
or
good.
I like Shiraz. I also really,
Malbec.
really
I
like
love the South American
Malbec. I was just
Malbecs are
gonna
really
say, yeah.
good. Yeah.
Malbec, what it is for me, and I'm not a wine snob. Like I don't know anything about wine at all. All I know is I like a red wine that feels or tastes kind of smooth and doesn't
Mhm.
like kick me in the back of the throat on the way down. Like that's all I know how to say. And sometimes I'll tell that to people and they'll be able to understand what that means and how to suggest something, and then I end up having delicious wine. But if
Mhm.
you leave it to me to walk into a store and pick out a red, it's not or a wine of any kind, it's not going to go well. Because I don't have a refined palate at all, at all. But I do enjoy it. I do enjoy it.
Probably like fruit notes more than something that has too much like oak or tannins in it. Like if it's like,
Maybe. And
because I'm not a wine snob either. You know how I know that a wine's expensive? I don't like it. That's how I know that it's
that
expensive. It's just like,
sounds
I don't
completely on
like
point
that.
with
That's
where I'm
probably
at.
$300.
It's
And if
going
I
to be at
really, really
least,
like it, I'm like, oh, this is delicious. It's probably $10.
it's probably really cheap. I recently discovered blackberry wine, and I'm sure somebody out there is like horrified, but it's
Yeah.
so delicious. It's so
So
good, and it's so
good.
cheap.
It's really good. Yes. Yeah.
I don't understand. Okay, actually, somebody brought up the Atea, so I do want to come back here. This, to me, I'm so curious. So you had been, I think, I don't have your timeline right, I'm sure, but SKT Revelations had come out. You, I think, had already done Tao, or you had already started on Tao, or not Tao of Craft, the I Ching one, the I Ching book,
I Ching book was the third edition,
the third edition.
Revelation
And
edition.
so then, when did Atea come into all of this?
When the I Ching book was done, and
Yeah,
well, it wasn't published yet. So, like, so the world
yeah.
doesn't know it's out there. It's not out in the world yet, but I was done with it. Like it was in the hands of a
Hmm.
publishing house, all of that. So I was done with the I Ching
Yeah.
book. All the SKT was done. I was just doing the distributions, the selling of it, because all of it was anointed. So all the anointing was done. All the ritual work of it was done. It was just about packing and shipping. And so that was when I sat down and started working on the Atea. I can't remember what
Oh,
year it was.
okay.
I wrote it down somewhere, like, it's on the internet. It's on my website where the
Yeah.
the the year that I started, 2022, maybe, I think it was. But, yeah, so it was after everything was kind of done, and I had a moment to breathe. I was like, "What do I do next?" "Oh, I know, an Atea tarot."
And why Atea?
At the time, I was just, you know how okay, in tarot, you know how you go through phases, like one, you're a kipper for, and then you're just all things kipper, all things Lenormand
Yes.
for like 3 months, right? So you go through these like
Yes.
weird phases, or like, you know, different types of tarot decks. You go through a Marseille phase. And so I was personally going through an Atea phase. So I had all of these, collecting a bunch of Atea decks. I was collecting books on the
Yeah.
Atea. And so then I was like, well, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just very natural if that's what you're obsessed with. And then if something is being
Yeah.
born while you're obsessed with it, it's like kind of in that little womb, right? Like it's being nurtured by the nutrients
Yeah.
that it's being fed in your environment. And so since I was obsessed with the Atea at the time, obviously, what kind of deck am I going to create? An Atea deck.
An Atea deck. Yeah. I get excited about Atea as a system because of the keywords, because I'm a keyword nerd. So I'm really excited to see how that all like comes out in at the end, like once it's gone through all of your refining processes. I'm so curious to see what the finished product is going to be like. Let's hop into another question. So Sylvia asks, Sylvia says, I know you have an incredibly vast collection of decks. Do you know how many exactly?
Um, I think maybe around 2000, I think. I started packing some of it away into storage boxes and making the inventory list. So that, you know, that would, because if you put it in a box, then you want to be able to know what's inside that box. So, you know, you create that
Yeah.
Excel sheet, right? So I started creating the Excel sheet, putting it away in boxes and inventorizing, if that's even a word, my decks. I got it up to about 1,000. And I just like lost wind. I'm like, I can't. This is insane.
It's so
I need
many.
like a team. This is not a one person job. So I just abandoned ship. I stopped that project altogether.
You're like,
And
I'm
so
done.
only right. So only half my deck got inventory, like got into the little like storage boxes with databases, the whole thing with the Excel sheet. And I still had
Yeah.
a whole other half. You could tell about, I only got about midstream of the full collection of decks I needed to go through that process. So by that estimate, probably around 2000.
Yeah, wild. And do you ever rehome or do you ever find yourself
That's why
no,
I have 2000, is
your
because I
inventory
don't rehome. That's the reason,
yeah,
Lisa, that's the reason we are in this situation, is because I do not rehome. If I had rehomed, then we wouldn't have this problem.
we wouldn't be here.
We
We wouldn't
wouldn't
be
be
here.
here.
It's so funny. It's I love hearing how different people engage with what they bring in with the volume because this is what I've struggled with. And why I sometimes have rehomed and then repurchased, which is a whole cycle that's not great. I do not recommend. I recommend being slower to rehome if you might be like that. But I will say for me, I will hit a point, and I don't know if it's just how I engage with my things, but I hit a point where I'm like, I can't, it starts to become white noise. I don't know how else to
100%.
describe it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So do you ever deal with that? And if so, what's your solution? How do you work within that noise?
I don't know. I don't have a solution. I'm still trying to figure out what that is. If you come up with a solution first,
Oh,
please do share, send me a message. I have no idea. I think it's true. And like that kind of also then it then catapults you into like almost like deck overwhelm, burnout, like,
yeah.
oh, you're done with tarot for a while because it feels like white
Yeah.
noise. You have so many tarot decks. And it becomes like not meaningless, but there's just, it's all white noise. Like you said, that's such a great way for you to put it. And so then
Yeah.
you lose like that sentimentality. It's almost like if you
Yeah.
have one deck, like you just love it so much, there's just so much in it, right? But then if you have
Yeah.
1,000, it can kind of feel lost in the, in the minutia. And like I don't even
Yeah.
know all the decks that I have. Like I'll see someone show a deck, I'm like, oh, that's a really cute deck, I really like it, and
And you'll
apparently
have
I
it.
have it. Like I didn't even know I had it, and that's an awful, like it's really
No,
privileged and wonderful, but it's also not good, like it's
like I've had that experience too, though, where I forget, oh, I had that at one point and I rehomed it, or I do have it and I've forgotten about it. You want to hear a silly thing that I do? And I go in and out of doing this, but online you can find a website called like Spin the Wheel. It's how you can do giveaways and things like that. So I have pasted, so I do keep a spreadsheet, mostly because as I create videos, I always show what I've gotten in and I will make videos about them. So as I make those videos, I create a link for that video for the video or for the a link for the deck for the video, so I just might as well put it in a spreadsheet as I go. So I do that. So thankfully I think I mostly have everything in a spreadsheet. So what I do is I copy the entire column of deck names and I put it into a spin the wheel, and I do that for tarot, oracle, and then Lenormand. So every once in a while I'll just go into the website and I'll spin the wheel and I'll pick a deck or two to work with. And sometimes I'll pair things that way. So I'll pick a tarot off the spin the wheel and then I'll spin the wheel again for an oracle and put them together and just kind of see what happens. So that's a little chaos monkey idea you could try sometime.
divination for divination.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's very cool.
with like pieces of paper in jars or rolling dice or like things like that can be really fun too. But it's nice to be in the position where you can have a collection and have that feel okay, even if it's you don't always maybe you don't always remember what you have or you don't always have that relationship. But I also feel like you can't go backward. At least for me, I can't go backward. I had one deck only for years and years, and then it grew. And while that was great, and I feel like when I had one deck, I never envied people who had more. I didn't think about it. But now that I have many, I sometimes envy people who have one, which is such an interesting place to be. But I don't know that that would work for me anymore. It's just not the way that I engage with tarot. I like working with different energies and different flavors and interpretations. So I don't know, could you ever imagine yourself now, today, going back to just one? And like,
Different strokes for different folks. And I think it depends on what your
agree.
relationship with the tarot is and what you like to do with
Yeah.
tarot and what interests you in terms of studies. And so, because of
Yeah.
my particular interest in the tarot, having one doesn't make sense for me because
Yeah.
it's just like having one book makes no sense for me because I need to have, I mean, my book collection is in the same, problem. I have the same problem with books as I do with tarot decks, and I have like thousands and
Yeah.
thousands of books. But for me, that's where I am. That's why I'm so verbose
Yeah.
because I like that. But then there are things like, high heels. I only have one pair of black high heels, and then I literally wear it till you can't show up in public with it. Then I buy a new pair. And so when I
Yeah.
see people with like 100 pairs of shoes, for me, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you waste space in your closet with 100 pairs of shoes? So different folks for
Yeah.
different strokes, whatever the,
Uh,
whatever that phrase
this
is.
it works both ways if you really think about it.
Oh yeah, right, right, right.
Yeah. So we have another question. What let's see, here we go. How would you advise someone to approach the SKT who really loves and resonates with it, but is a little overwhelmed by all the depth? And I'm sure you get this a lot because there is so many layers to SKT, and some of us hit that and we're like, shoot, I'm never gonna get this. What do you say?
Well, it's kind of like the person who wants to travel and see the whole world, but they never take a step out of the city because like, well, I want to go to France, but I also want to go to Bermuda. Like, where do I go? Where do I go? Where's that one first place to go? Right. I think, one of the things people tell people who like to travel, the dart to the map. And so for me, I think pull a card, just, do a reading, pull a single card, look up the meaning of that card in the little white booklet that comes with it. So you don't even have to go into the big, book of maps yet. And if something there entices you or interests you, then you can dig deeper into the book of maps. So always start with a single card draw. And where does that take you? I think you need that one path in. And then once you have that one path in, you can figure out what the next step is. And then what the next step is. Then you learn piecemeal by piecemeal baby steps. I think what overwhelms people is knowing that there's a universe there and wanting to consume the universe in one bite. And that's just not attainable.
Yes.
So instead of thinking, I want to consume the universe in a single bite, just go, okay, just one card, one small entry in the little white booklet and see where that takes me. And baby step by baby step, you will learn a lot about, just the different cultures and traditions from that the deck showcases.
I like the analogy around travel because I definitely am one of those people that will overthink in that way. I want to understand everything, and so it will freeze me in my tracks, and I won't take that first step. And I think that's actually a really interesting paradigm in general for like my approach to many things is I will stop myself because I'm afraid of where it's going to end up, or I'm worried I can't do it all, and so I won't do anything. And that can really hold us stuck in a place. It does and maybe this is only tangentially related. It's only related in my head, but I am curious with the layers that you tend to do in your work and the depth you go into, do you struggle with burnout? Have you had major burnout phases? And what is your like how have you navigated that? Are you still working on it? Like where are you at with burnout in general?
I think, well, burnout or exhaustion is when you don't have enough fuel to your resources, whatever the resource, energy, whatever it is, you don't have enough resources to fuel what it is you want to accomplish or achieve. So then you
Yeah.
experience burnout. So there's two things. Either one, reevaluate what it is you want to achieve because you need to be conscientious of your energy resources, or find a
Mhm.
way to pull up more repositories. You need more resources, more energy. And how do you refuel yourself? Self-care is one way. There's a lot of things that we do, energy cultivation, energy balancing, psychic work to refuel your energy. Eating food is a great way. Nutrition really matters. And so I think about what can I do to up my energy levels so I have enough fuel to achieve what it is I want to achieve. And then you don't experience burnout. But then if I do experience burnout and I don't have that fuel to get to where I want to go because that leap is too big, that ambition is too untenable,
Mhm.
then I reevaluate my own goal setting. Like, why did I set that goal? Is that really what I want?
Yeah.
So I always feel like I trust my body too. So if I experience burnout and my body doesn't want to, get the resources to use it and direct all my energy and resources to that thing to achieve this crazy thing that I've set for myself, I listen to my body rather than my mind and my ambitions. And I go, well, okay, wait a minute, check in
Mhm.
with myself. Why don't I want to expend all of this energy and invest all of my resources into this one thing? And usually I find the answer that that thing is not the real thing that I actually want. I'm actually just parroting somebody else's goal, or the ambition is superficial,
Mhm.
or it's for something that really has nothing to do with myself. And then when I do something for myself, I almost never experience burnout because my body knows it wants this thing and it will always make sure I have what I need to get that thing.
Well, I love that perspective. I go in cycles, and I don't even know if burnout's entirely the right word, but I go in cycles where maybe it's overwhelm. Maybe that's what it is more so. And I don't know if it's the same thing, but I like the perspective of first listening to yourself and sort of checking in and going, why is it that this feels hard right now? Or why is it that this feels like I don't have enough to accomplish it? And giving yourself permission to question the goal as well as like, what's going on inside. You made an interesting point about when it's something you're doing for yourself, you never experience burnout because your body and your internal systems will always function in order to get you what you want for yourself, which is so interesting because one of the things I talk about a lot on TerraTube and YouTube is my main goal, and I don't know if this was just an intuitive thing, but my main goal has always been it has to stay fun. It
Mhm.
has to be fun for me. It has to be rewarding for me because otherwise I won't do it forever. Like I want to do it for as long as possible because it's so fulfilling. So I have to always be serving that. And I recognize that sounds really selfish because I want my content to be of service. But it's like also, I'm aware that if it's not also feeding back to me, that I just won't want to do it anymore. Like it's just like an internal awareness. What I haven't mastered, and I feel like I'm good with that with YouTube, I haven't always mastered that with my other creative projects. I get very I guess, tunnel visioned about wanting to make something useful or wanting to serve or wanting to put something out that helps someone or whatever. And I get so in that zone that it's easy for me to it's like that part of me that wants to serve my own fulfillment gets further and further away. And I'm not always great at keeping tethered to that. Do you do a good job of keeping tethered to that? You know what I mean? Keeping tethered to the part that is serving you?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is. I think
Yeah.
sometimes we want to serve because there is that inner people pleaser. We feel like we're only
Yeah, for sure.
valuable if people find us useful. So in that case, you
Hmm.
can experience overwhelm, you can experience burnout because it's not a true goal. I think when you want
Right.
to serve because it's something that is core to who you are and your values. So for example, like the easiest
Hmm.
example I can think of is like you go through something, you had to experience some sort of pain or some sort of suffering or trauma, and you want to make sure nobody else goes through what you go through, or you've achieved
Hmm.
all these insights and learnings that you want to make sure the world is able to learn from so it didn't happen in vain or something like that, right? Then I feel like that service is a very different tenor of service than like I just want to serve to
True.
people pleaser, right? So I think you have to be very thoughtful about what it is you want to serve and why you want to serve.
I love that actually. It's a really, really good point and kind of digs into this other layer that again is something I try to talk to other creators about pretty regularly, but a lot of us struggle with imposter syndrome, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a big bit, and staying grounded and not letting that imposter syndrome keep you from taking forward steps. Do you feel like you've got this down? Are you do you deal with this? Like where are you on the spectrum if you're comfortable sharing? And if you're not obviously with any of this, feel free to
Oh, of course yeah, I'm fine. Like yes and no. Like I think I experience imposter syndrome, but I also think that I'm privileged enough where I have a lot of love in my life, like true love.
Mhm.
That I'm like, well, if you think I'm an idiot, that's okay. Like at the end of the day, like it's fine. If you think I'm stupid,
Yeah.
it's okay. There's people at home that really love me. They think I'm fantastic, and so
Oh, that's
because of
amazing.
that,
I love that.
because I have that, I think that's a really lucky thing to have when you know that there's people who love you and they think you're superwoman. And so I could do no
Yeah.
wrong in their eyes. So it's okay that some people out there think I'm an idiot. So I'm more willing to take intellectual risks. I'm more willing to take that
Ah,
leap of
yes.
faith, because if I fall, I really can't fall, because I'm
Yeah.
lucky enough that I have people there to catch me.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that so much. That makes my heart just like pitter patter. It's funny because when I was writing the first tarot book, it was in my brain since I was like a little baby witch, like 1920. I was like, I want to write a book for Llewellyn. It was like such a big thing for me. And like this was years down the line, right? And so when I found myself writing the book, I spent so much time during the writing of it being so like they're going to hate this. They're going to hate this and kick it back to me. And my poor wife was like trying to talk me through this. And it brings me back to something you said in the very beginning, which is that, there's always the option if you create something like that, that if they don't want it, whatever, they kick it back, then I self-publish it. Like, and she reminded me that she's like, you've already self-published a book. Like, if they decide they don't want it, who cares? You already know you can self-publish it. So just self-publish it. And the way that it took all of that weight off my shoulders of like, I have to meet somebody else's expectation. And the way you just expressed that, that's why. It's because somebody who loves me and knows me is like, no, you don't have to worry about that. Who cares? And it's like, oh yeah, who cares? But sometimes I need to like check back in with that energy. But I think it's beautiful to anchor it in. Look, I've got people in my life who love me and know me for me and believe in me. So I don't have to care if anybody else does. And that's a good reminder for those of us who do bump up against that wall to be like, wait, look at who's around you in your immediate circle and go from there. I love that.
And also, just to, add to that, I think that's also why it's so important, for why community is so important. And so we also have a social responsibility. If you have that privilege and you have that in your life, then you have a responsibility to be that for somebody else, to kind of pay it forward.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to be part of a community, to make sure that you are a genuine and sincere cheerleader for other people, rallying them on so they can
Yeah.
take intellectual risks and they're willing to take leaps of faith because they know that you think the
Yeah.
world of them, because you really do think the world of them. So yeah, I think it's not
Yeah.
only to have, but you also need to be able to give as well, especially if you do have.
Yeah, I think it really blew me away when I embarked on the indie creators process, just how many people were willing to share and not to kind of gatekeep and protect. And that was so incredible to experience and to be able to do that for others, to be like, yeah, let me share my resources, let me walk you through this, let me answer your questions, you want to start a channel, let's talk about it. That's like my favorite thing in the entire world, because I have never experienced ever a situation in which protecting or keeping that knowledge sacred has overall benefited the community at large. And I always think we all do so much better when we lift each other up as much as we possibly can. And I'm not perfect at it for sure, but I try to like do that, and I try to like support and lift up other creators or highlight other creators, help behind the scenes, whatever. But you're right, like those that can be anchored can support and cheerlead for others, and that's a really powerful way to pay it forward, especially if you've been lucky enough to have the help and support along your journey. So it's pretty great. And you do a lot of that kind of work, like y'all, if the amount of stuff you put out into the world so generously, and I'm not just kissing your ass, I truly, but it's legitimate. Like, I found your course on self-publish, like indie self-publishing a deck, I think is what it was, I forget what it was called. You charged something ridiculous, like $20 or so. It was so insane. I could not believe the amount of resources I got for this amount of, like, the amount you shared. And I know I told you this before, but it really gave me a lifeline when I was jumping in. And from there, I then got the courage to ask other creators questions and kind of reach out. But that was the most accessible to me in that moment, where I felt like I don't want to be a burden to anybody. I don't want to. So I did that and was able to gather all those resources. And truly, I don't know if I would have taken step two without
That's
that.
awesome. Wow.
Yeah, it really makes a difference. And so, yeah, creators like you who share their resources, who share their knowledge, it does make a difference. So had to say that, but incredible.
Thank you.
I have more questions for you. Okay, so what's your favorite color? This is from Boo. What's your favorite color? And can you name your top few things that are in that color?
Mine is flowers, red flowers. What's my So I always thought blue was my favorite color. And so
Yeah.
since like the second or third grade, blue is the color. So if you have a choice of a color for something, I always choose the blue thing, the blue one, right? I think
Mhm.
lately though, it just is kind of white, not because white's my favorite color, but I find that I will pick the white thing. Right, like the white
You'll pick the
shirt, the
white thing.
white shoes. Like I like selenite. So, for example, I really like all the stones. I like howlite. I know howlite's not always real,
I
right?
love howlite.
But I love howlite. Like
No, so you gotta be careful with howlite.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Some of it's always right, it's fake,
Yeah.
right? The really pretty ones are fake, like, "Oh, that's a bummer." But,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
selenite, like pearl, I'm really into pearl for some reason, I don't know. Mother of pearl as well, although that's kind of more, nace the colors. But, yeah, I think I just choose white now, and, like, even, like, in terms of interior decor, I want things to be white for some reason now
White?
rather than blue. I don't know why, I can't even explain
It
it.
just changed at some
I
point.
just have to, like,
White's
do
your
some
thing now.
self-reflection and figure out what happened, but yeah, I would say
Why
blue because
white?
I think blue is my favorite color, but recently I've been choosing the white thing because I like that, like,
Interesting.
pristine, like,
There's a
clear.
piece to that too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so, yeah.
That was a great question. That was a fun one. Thanks, guys. Okay, Sylvia asked another question. If you had to pick only 3 decks, oh, we love this question, don't we? Yeah,
I hate this is a
this
terrible
is an
question.
evil
I'm
one.
kidding, it's a
Yeah,
great question.
it's the desert island question. If you had to pick only 3 to take with you on a desert island, which ones would you pick and why? Good luck.
Um, like, is it
Do we need
narcissistic
parameters? Do
for
we
me
need
to
to
say
know,
my
like,
own? Like
yeah, like how long are we going to be on this desert island? That's what I want to know. Like, is this like a temporary stint on the desert island or like a forever we're stranded situation? I think some clarity would be helpful.
Okay, so to answer this question more seriously though, right? I have thought about this. Like, I know this is a weird actually it's not that okay, here's the thing. It's not that weird of a question. The reason for it because there's all of these California fires now. So let's say
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it really let's
Okay.
say I had to, like a bug out bag, like, I have to evacuate in 30 minutes, and, obviously, most of that 30 minutes, you have to pack real stuff, survival stuff, and your mementos and family heirlooms and things like that. So which 3
Yeah.
decks if I had to just pull off the shelf and go with, right? Now, if I can
Bingo.
count my own deck as one, then probably just, like, one of my own because that is something I created. But, okay, even with that, right, I always thought this is what I really realized, and the answer is I would actually turn it into a divination. I would just pull 3 decks and just run, and it is what it is. So I would translate
Yeah.
that answer into the desert question answer. I would just pull
Yeah.
3 decks, and then it is what it is, and kind of have faith that it was meant to be. Like, in that moment, something deep inside of me pulled those 3 decks, so I wouldn't process it, I wouldn't overanalyze, I wouldn't think. I would just grab 3 and go, and that would be what I work with for the rest of my life, and that was meant to be. So I can't say
Yeah.
which decks would be it would just be from my collection, and I think that's a great
Like an
way to
intuitive, like gut hit.
Yeah,
That's interesting because
exactly.
I actually heard from somebody, I wish I could remember who mentioned this, but they were in that situation. They had to just grab. And they said the ones they grabbed were the ones they would have thought they would have grabbed, which is so interesting. And it was just like a handful. Again, I don't remember the context, but it's sticking in my memory. I think for me, I would grab, like I always say that my This Might Hurt Tarot is one of my desert island decks
Mm.
because I feel like I can use it to read for any questions. It's always felt very, very like it would work for anything. But if I was legitimately in a position where I had to grab, I think I would probably be more likely to grab for sentimentality first, but I don't know. Like if I was
Yeah.
actually like in that situation. Yeah, that's a tough one.
The reason it's a hard question is because, okay, maybe you grab for sentimentality reason, but then it's not for the tarot. It's because of the memory behind that object, and
Yeah.
it could be anything. It just happens to be a tarot deck. Because I feel like if you have to
Yeah.
grab and go, and you're in that sort of like dire situation, for me,
Yeah.
I think I'm detached enough from my things that it's kind of
Yeah.
okay to let it all go, including my own tarot deck. Like, I wouldn't grab I think
Same.
I'm in a
I don't
place
think I'd
where it's
grab mine
okay,
either.
yeah, to just detach from
Yeah.
everything and go somewhere where from and start from ground zero and figure it out from there. Maybe I'll create my own tarot deck on that island out of leaves, you know?
That is such a Benebell plan. Definitely just be able to create my own. So like I'm not worried about it. That's amazing. I love that so much. That is so on point. And yeah, Barb says she'd want to grab decks that you can't rebuy. That's
Mhm.
I think that's the thing is
Yeah,
I
me too.
think logically you'd think that'd be where you'd go, but something tells me I would end up grabbing, like if I was actually in a situation like that, I'd probably end up with like 3 mass market decks. Like no problem. Like just it'd be probably just like you said, whatever speaks to you in the moment, whatever you don't want to be without
Mhm.
is what you'd grab. So in that moment, what is going to serve you might not be your lifetime choice, but might be the choice you need in that moment too. So it's, yeah, it's such an interesting scenario. This is a good one from Melissa DeVries. Do you have a set way to connect with a new deck or to reconnect with an old deck? Do you have any kind of rituals or anything like that that you like to do?
I think now I find that if I put it on my altar, so I put some of my, mementos, the things that I consider sacred, my little, doodads, and I put it around it and I put it on my altar. And I find that that charges my deck, that I can then connect with it afterwards. So that's something that I do. I put it on it's almost like I'm putting it before your higher consciousness, right? Like the inner divinity
Hmm.
saying, this is something I want to work with. It's almost like the ritual itself is almost more for myself. I don't know what the rationale is, but something happens where I am able to connect with a new deck or reconnect with an old one simply by putting it on my altar and letting it charge on my altar overnight. And the next day, it's me and that deck are like, very close.
Good to go.
Yeah, we're good to
Yeah.
go.
I I don't know what happens for me with decks. I feel like it's more of an energetic thing. I've never been able to find a ritual that like clicks it. It's almost something else that either happens or it doesn't happen. It's very hard to describe, but I haven't yet found something that just definitely like sets it. Actually, that's not true. A lot of times, if I do a walkthrough, that's why I started doing video walkthroughs on my channel. Actually, is that walkthrough, spending that time sort of talking through and getting to know the deck, like out loud, speaking my feelings about it as I go through. If I'm being real, I think most of the decks that I've truly bonded with, I've done that process with, which is so interesting. And oftentimes, if I don't do that process, I'll have to do it on my own. But it's not something I like plan to do. It's just something I've kind of noticed there's a connection there. It's always interesting. I'd be curious from those of you in chat to answer this question too. What do y'all do to connect with your deck or to reconnect with an old one? I'd love to see what y'all have to say about that. Oh, hi, Jenny. I've been terrible about greeting y'all, but hello. We're so happy to have you here. Um, Faye of the Forest, new projects you are working on. So is there anything besides, we know you're working on Atea. Is there something else in the works that you can or want to speak about?
Oh, I'm more than happy to share it. I think right now it's more okay because I'm doing convocation in later on in February. So the only thing I've been doing obsessively is working on the PowerPoints and the handouts and all of the paraphernalia that goes with three 90-minute presentations. Convocation is very different from the tarot conferences where you do one 90-minute conference, like a 90-minute thing. Maybe you participate in a couple of panel discussions, but you don't prepare for the panel discussions, right? Or just like minimal
Mhm.
preparation. But yeah, so they want three 90-minute like presentations, and I'm treating it like dissertation defenses. Like I'm really
Oh my
taking it
goodness.
super seriously, like all the research, everything. So that's what I've been obsessively working on because I do want to produce a very good content when you talk about soul retrieval and the ritual, all of that stuff. So yeah, that's the project I've been working on. But also the translation. I wanted to do a translation of the Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching, and I wanted to make it public domain. So instead of publishing it through a traditional publisher or even self-publishing it, I'm going to put out the entire translation and annotation of the Tao Te Ching as a public domain work. So it's free for anyone to take and use as is at will. So that's my next project.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's going to be a good one. And if you don't mind me sidestepping back to convocation, so this is, I did a quick Google because you mentioned it to me in private the other day. And do you want to tell us anything about that? Like, when is it? What is it? If you know
It's around
anything.
February 20th, but if you Google convocation, I think it's convocation.org, convocation.org. It's in
Yeah,
Ypsilanti, Michigan, and it's been going on forever. I didn't know that. It's been around
me
since the
either.
90s. And so
Wild.
but then it's always been, I think, a little bit more niche in terms of like the type of people or the scope of occultists that go. It's very much Western ceremonial magic. I heard, I don't know. And then I think
Yeah.
recently, in recent years, they've expanded it out to be a little bit more diverse and bring in a greater diversity of magical traditions, which is how I got
Oh,
invited to go
cool.
there, I think. So when you read the schedule now, you really see really huge diversity of magical traditions from all over the world. Whereas I think before it was
That's
more just,
amazing.
yeah. So it was really, really cool to be invited to participate.
That is awesome. So you're doing 390. So are all the presenters doing 3 90-minute? How does that work? Or is this like a keynote style thing where you're sort of headlining in some way? Like, I'm just curious because I'm a nerd.
I think that all guest of honors do so there's guest of honor speakers, that's what they're called. So the guest of honors do 3. So I think,
Okay.
Christopher Penczak and Matt Oren are the other 2, speakers,
Wow.
and Devin Hunter as well. And so
What a lineup.
I don't know how they're doing 3. I should ask, like, "How are you guys doing this?" Because I am dead. Like, I'm losing it. It is so difficult. It's really, really hard
Yeah.
to do.
That's a lot of work for
Yeah.
sure. And knowing that the content is going to be so meaty. And it sounds like that type of an event, right? A very um education heavy or resource heavy style event. Yes?
And ritual heavy, so it's both. So, for example, one of
Oh,
my talks is going to be, so I want to present the unbroken line from shamanism in 3000 BC China in the Yellow River civilizations and how that evolved into Taoist magic and mysticism, and show you the history of that, and also how practices we do today are the same practices that we did 3000 years ago, where that is a similarity. But I can't just pull that out of my ass. I have to bring the research and citations. So there's that
of
aspect
course.
of it. The other one is on soul retrieval. And so when you do ritual, I think with these types of like events, you have to be very mindful to be inclusive. And if your culture is like more in the minority, how do you craft ritual in a way that is meaningful for as many people as possible without diluting it? That's really
Yeah,
hard, And then like
that is
if a
hard.
lot of like there's a lot of like back cultural knowledge you need to do the ritual in the way it's intended to. So then you have to modify the culture because you have to account for people who know nothing about the tradition. And so
Right.
it's really tough to navigate.
So are you're sort of presenting material, but you're also leading some sort of practice as well?
For the soul retrieval one, I'm still working on it. Like I'm trying to figure out how to teach people preventive measures, things that you can learn, actionable pieces of practice you can integrate and adapt into your own practice so you know how to prevent soul fragmentation. So I teach preventive
Right.
care for soul fragmentation and also curative care. So after somebody, if you do meet somebody who has fragmentation of soul, how do you break glass in an emergency? Like how do you cure soul fragmentation? So those are the 2 things I want to
Wow.
teach.
That is heady material for
Right, it is very
sure.
heavy, right?
Oh my God, but
Yeah.
that's amazing because I got to participate in a this was many years ago, so I could not tell you. It was very powerful though. It was a shamanistic practice of soul retrieval, and it was on a, I would say, very light level. And yet it was incredibly potent and powerful and felt very healing in a really short amount of time, but it was led by somebody who clearly knew what they were doing and was able to lead us very compassionately and in a very grounded way through this practice with relatively little back knowledge. But I cannot, having had that experience and how memorable it was, I cannot imagine trying to teach or express that. So that's very ambitious. So you've got one on soul retrieval curative, or is this all 3 tied together into the same?
Oh, 3 completely separate. So one of them is, soul retrieval theory and practice, and then a second one is from shamanism to Taoism, and to talk about the 4,000
That's
year
the through
history of
line.
how and then also through
Gotcha.
that, learn the basics of Taoist magic. So I'm teaching you some of the basics
Wow.
there. Oh, the soul retrieval one gets into Buddhist mysticism as well, and then the third one is the presentation that I did at StarCon a couple years ago, which is on the occult history of the tarot. And so it's on
Oh,
like
nice.
when did the 1760s, but I know fortune telling and divination was one of the purposes for tarot well before Anton Cordy Jabalan or Atea got their hands on the tarot. But like it really was in Paris, France, that you start really seeing it become more institutionalized within the world of Western occultism. So talking about just the influences of some of these big names, Alpha Levi, and how they influence the trajectory of occult tarot. So that's my third topic.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, no wonder you're like just packed
Overwhelmed,
with prep
just completely
work.
like, "This is
Yeah.
insane." I don't know how other people do it. It's so difficult to do 3.
I mean, I think in general, conference bringing material to a conference can definitely run the gambit for how deep the content goes, or into any kind of group gathering. And so I think you're going to see that variability. I think not everybody will bring that level of depth to their work, which doesn't make it less valuable, but it does make it different, and requires a different level of prep. But I think it's pretty great that they have you on the roster so they can get some of that really meaty, substantial stuff. That's amazing. Fairlight Tarot Sylvia again asks, how do you find balance between the many activities you're involved in? So you've got obviously you work, you've got the tarot, your personal studies, your social life, your family. Like, how do you manage all of that?
I always get asked this question and I never know how to answer, but I think maybe it's also what it is I don't let the concept of having to do a lot overwhelm me and then stop me from doing anything at all. I think that what happens
Yeah.
is like, oh my God, I have so much to do. I want to do all the things. And so then you don't do anything at all. So I don't really,
Yep.
I just dive. So I've always been a very
Yeah.
like, I dive right in. I take the first step. So for example, even like the tarot deck, I'm like, I know nothing about drawing. I know nothing about, well, I mean, not, I don't know anything about drawing, but like,
I was
creating
gonna say.
professional drawing. Like I've always been an
Yeah.
artist. I wanted to get my MFA in visual design when I was younger instead of going to law school. So it's not like I don't know anything about art, but like professional art, I didn't know anything about. And then publishing a tarot deck, I didn't know, but I just like, well, what step one? And then, figure it out step by step. So I just dive right in. And then once I hit a problem, I solve that problem. Then I go. And then I hit another problem. I solve that problem. I go. So that's kind of how I approach life. I don't really think about problems. And I also noticed that's a big difference between James, my husband, and I. I find that that's how I learned about myself is by watching him deal with life. Like he encounters a problem. He's like, oh my gosh, there's so many problems with that. I don't know what to do. And he kind of like stops. And I feel like there's a problem.
Yeah.
I just like keep on breaking at that wall until the wall falls down and like go again. And so I keep on breaking barriers over and over. And so I think how I balance all of the things is I just do it. And then
Yeah.
I don't think. Like, I really just don't think. I just go into automatic drive. I just know I have all these things that I wanna do, so so right now I start with this, and I do it, and I finish it. Like, I have to peel, 25 persimmons so I can sun dry it. So I sit there and I peel
I was
25.
totally gonna ask you about the persimmons.
Yeah, and so I just do that, and then it's like, okay, now I need to go and start schedule a couple of blog posts, so I go and do that, and then now I need to go do work.
Yeah.
I got a couple of messages pinging me on my phone that there's something at work, there's an emergency at work, so then I stop that. It's kind of just like, one thing at a time. I don't know if
It's kind
that's
of
a good
intuitive.
answer, unfortunately,
It's
but
not
that's kind of how I do it. It's
it's a
auto.
useful answer because yeah, it's a true answer. I think that's the thing is like that's how you're managing, and that's the question. I do you ever find yourself looking back, okay, so you're kind of like focusing one thing at a time, you kind of like maybe multiple things at a time. You sort of go where the need is at any given moment. Do you ever find that your personal relationships end up inadvertently taking a back seat, or you realize, oh wow, I haven't really given enough attention to my spouse or my family, or I've been too in the zone. I've struggled with that at times where I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just been in the bubble and have to kind of reconnect and like rebalance that as well in a more mindful way or an intentional way. Does that ever become a thing that you have to kinda notice and address?
I think yes, but also I think my loved ones are they kind of have similar personalities as I do. So James, for example, is very independent, and then my sisters have similar personalities as I do. But I find that the relationship doesn't suffer because if they need me, like no matter what I'm doing, no matter what it is, how important, even if it's work, if I get a call from my sister and she has that voice and I know it's really important, I drop everything. It doesn't matter. It's over.
Yeah,
I just drop
yeah,
everything. I turn to her. Okay, it's just you and I until this problem gets solved. And so I think
yeah,
because my friends and loved ones know that about me, they're not needy. Like they don't need me like
yeah.
every single day because they know if they sat down and said, "Okay, I'm pushing the red button." If they push the red button with me, they've got me 100%. So I think because of
Yeah.
that, I don't really have to like pay them superficial attention.
Worry. Yeah,
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 yeah.
there's not this, like, need to get ahead of the problem. You
Right, right,
when
right.
there's an issue, you're present for it, and you're able to move forward from there. I think that's great. We had oh, this was some feedback on how Jenny handles the charging of decks. I'll charge it with my energy or full moon energies, place crystals. I love that, or specific oils on my hands. I love using oils on my
Me
hands,
too.
before working with the deck, actually. That's one of my favorite simple ways to pull magic in to a process, and I love that. Oh, I think it was your anointing oil. You use a classical or historical anointing
Oil of
oil.
Bromelain, yes. So I started off with the oil of bromelain, and I followed the Book of Bromelain's recipe. There's a whole bunch of different recipes. So I treated it like anything else. I studied all the different recipes and worked through it. And it was based on the Bible too. It's based on that anointing oil in the Old Testament. So I started with that oil, and then over time crafted my own interpretation of certain things that were a little bit more open ended. And so now I have my own
Yeah.
version of that oil. But yes, it was originally the oil of bromelain.
Oh, love that. Love that. And then, I wanted to get to the persimmons and all the amazing food, and Sylvia came with the question. So you always post photos of delicious food on Instagram. Do you like to cook? What's your favorite dish to prepare? Tell us about the food. I used a picture of you with a cookie because to me, when I think of Benebell on social media, that's what I think of is like food and experimentations and making mascara eyeliner out of
I have
abstract.
tried
Is
that
that what?
before with the burnt almond, yeah, and then the burnt clove. Yes, I've tried that before
Yeah.
to make my own makeup. I love cooking. Cooking to me is magic, and so I very much approach cooking as magic, and it's very, very practical magic because it's traditional Chinese medicine, it's mysticism, it's religion, it's all of the things all mixed together. It's and it's just science as well because you then bring in science. So I think when you cook, you learn a lot about methodology and science that you can then convert into other forms of magical workings. And so for me, it is magic. It's also where I learned TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, and herbalism and things like that. And so I very much integrate all of that into cooking. My favorite dish to prepare. Um, I love everything. Like I really cook pretty diversely, so I don't know what my favorite dish is. I think right now, my favorite dish is probably oxtail soup. I love making oxtail soup. The thing that it's not a favorite dish to prepare because I haven't done it yet. The thing that I want to do, sort of my aspiration, and I hope this answers your question, Fairlight Tarot, is okay. So there's historically this like 12-day feast that the Emperor of China did, and so it's a set menu and it's a 12-day feast made for the emperor. I want to replicate that at some point, but I
Of
don't
course
have
you
12 days.
do.
Like I work full time right now. So maybe after I retire or at some point, it's on my bucket list to recreate the 12-day feast that was made for the emperor of China back in the day.
That is incredible. Is it like is it like one dish each day, or is it like a full
No,
course
it
sort
was
of
a full course
every
breakfast.
day for
Yeah,
12 days?
I think 2 meals. I think it was 2 meals a day, and it's like all these
Oh my
specific
goodness.
and there's a whole bunch of rules, like, you can't repeat anything twice, and, like, some of the ingredients I would have to, like, import. I don't even know where I would get some of these ingredients, but yeah, it's, like, a really insane, like, thing, but I totally
That
wanna
would be
do it.
so fun.
Right?
That would be
Yeah,
such a fun like food adventure.
I think so.
I'm curious about like if you had to pick, if you had to pick one thing you had to eat every day for breakfast, and you could never change it, what would you pick?
In that case, probably kale. Like eggs and
Kale
kale,
for
and that sounds so
breakfast?
boring, but, like, okay, if I had to eat something every single day for the rest of my life, I would optimize nutrition. So I
You
would
would, of
pick
course you would.
I would pick something
Okay,
that would optimize nutritional value rather than something that I like, 'cause I would get bored of it, you know?
okay,
There's no
fair.
food I wouldn't not get bored of, even, like, lobster or, like, caviar, like, I'll get
I
bored
don't
of
get
it, so it has to be
okay,
the
so
nutritional value.
next level, let's assume your body has perfect nutrition at all times, no matter what you eat. Now you have to pick something. Mm. Okay, let's play this game. Let's say your body perfect nutrition at all times. You don't have to worry about nutrition, not a factor. This is purely for pleasure. What is one thing that you would add to your diet, maybe even regularly, not for nutritional, but just for pure pleasure, just because you can?
Um Oh, I forgot the name of the fast food restaurant. It's from the Philippines, but they have it here in California. Does anyone Oh, Jollibee's. Jollibee's deep fried
Okay,
chicken.
perfect. We got there, guys. I love it. Actually, in defense of kale, though, I love a good green smoothie, and I freaking love kale and avocado and like
Me too.
berries.
I do too.
The best thing. It's the best thing. It's so good. So, like, yes, kale, really, really good. But yeah, had to get there. It's the cookie. It's just in my brain. It's the cookie. Um, so I'm curious if you have like are you a routine person? It doesn't sound like it, but I'm curious. Are you a routine person or as far as like a daily routine, like some people like to maybe write morning pages or they might like to have a bedtime routine to wind down or something that sort of anchors them in spite of the chaos. Do you have anything like that in your sort of day to day?
Yes and no. So I do like routine, but then when things throw me off my routine, I'm also okay with it. And I just kind of go with the flow. So it's kind of so the answer is
Yeah.
yes and no. But one thing I do like to do is I like to rise with the sun. So I like to rise at the hour of
Mm,
sunrise, and then I just watch this. I happen to be able to watch the sunrise from my room because one of the rooms their faces due
oh,
east. And so just
yeah.
like a moment of like quiet rest, thinking about, the planetary the planetary ruler for the day, and just something very simple, or like just a couple of incantations or mantras or sutra recitations to the gods and while the sun
Yeah.
rises. So that's the
Oh, I love that. That's really nice. I always build new ones and then I back off and then I do something different. I'm changing them all the time.
same.
W- yeah, I like the variety, to be honest. So, and sometimes I'll find something that's really enriching and I'll do that until it just doesn't feel as enriching anymore, and then I'll find something new. Uh, Jenny's curious, what is something you've done that you are most proud of? This is hard for creatives, I know, but like something, if you were to pick one thing that's like, yes, this is a thing I'll point to, what would
um
it be?
I think Spirit Keepers Tarot, because
Yeah,
it was art. Like, it's something that was my passion. It's something I wanted to have done as my career, but I didn't. I ended up going into a different occupation instead. And so, like,
yeah,
just bringing that to life, creating, like finishing and putting out into the world an art project is something that was artistic.
yeah,
And then it was so me, like all mistakes are mine, all problems are mine. Everything you love about it is me. Like everything you love and hate about that deck is me to who I am. Like it's very much the core to who
yeah.
I am. So I really own it and I love that. And it's out there. And so that's probably the thing I'm the most proud of.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, you should be proud of that. That's such an incredible piece of work. Do you do any like do you ever do this is probably like a weird question, but it just popped into my mind. So do you ever do like a ritual or a spell or anything something magical, but for what's the right word? A more fun reason, a more frivolous reason, something kind of like just
Yes,
for play?
I
Okay,
do. I don't know if I want to share it though, but it's really
you don't
funny.
have to if you
Okay,
don't
no,
want
no, I
to.
can share it. Okay, HGTV, don't laugh. Everyone, okay, everyone's
I'm
gonna
not
think
gonna
about
laugh.
something else. So HGTV has this like they have like $1 million home that like, like a giveaway or sweepstakes, right? Where
Yes,
like
yes, totally.
you have to put in like your email every single day or something like that, and then you could
Yeah.
potentially win like some house, which by the way is actually a terrible thing. You never want to win that thing because I heard like there's a
No,
tax issue, like there's all these tax problems. Like if
it's a
you
whole
actually win
problem.
this
Yeah.
house. Anyway, but like since like part of me is like I'm never gonna. So anyway, I would like do like cute little magical spells to try to win, which obviously have failed miserably because I have not won. But like, yeah, that's one.
But so
One
fun.
stupid spell that I would do is to try to, yeah, that one.
Try to win the house.
Try to
That's
win the
amazing. I
house,
love that.
which I have not yet won.
That's excellent. Okay, let's say you could go back. I'm just making shit up now. But let's say you could go to any plane of existence. Let's just pretend. And you could meet, befriend, maybe even converse with a mythological creature or entity. So this could be a god, a goddess, could be like an animal, a mythological animal. What would you want to connect with? What would you want to like go see in person or talk to or connect with or have tea with?
So there's 2. Okay, so I think
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
answer is Kuan Yin, Guanyin Pusa. So Kuan Yin, the
Mm.
Bodhisattva, but I think I would have nothing to say to her. Like, I would just, like, I would just be like, "Hi," like, love your work, like, big fan, like I wouldn't know what to say. So I think maybe like
Perfect.
another also a goddess, but like Lady of the Nine Heavens, Zhou Tianquan. Like I feel like I have a more personal, intimate connection with that goddess where I feel like I not friends, but like I feel like it's more interpersonal that I would be able
Yeah.
to have to answer your question where I would be able to want to socially engage in some way with a
Yeah.
goddess, you know? Yeah, so those are my 2 answers.
This is such a wild, such a wild question. Oh my goodness. Oh, so Sylvia says Southeast Asia is blooming when it comes to tarot. So the Vietnamese artist behind the Quen tarot, excuse me, I probably butchered that. What do you think about non-US based tarot creators? Do they stand a chance in this market?
I think they do. I see a lot of like a lot of tarot people looking out overseas and really being interested in what other tarot content creators from other cultures are doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people talk about Korean tarot decks or Japanese made tarot decks. Thailand is really big right now. So
Yeah.
I do see a lot of people being actively interested. And I think the only thing they do stand a chance in the marketplace, and their problem is the same problem we have, only they have the language barrier, and that is marketing. And so I think if you're
Yeah.
from the same culture, you can use like culturally, every culture has their specific way of marketing. And so if you're not from
Yeah.
that culture, you're already a little bit like not know, you already don't know, you don't have the same vocabulary for marketing. And so I think that's the biggest hurdle for overseas deck creators, is how can they gain or attract exposure to their tarot decks. But if they are able to overcome that hurdle of marketing, then I do think a lot of us are really interested in what they're doing.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think there's been a lot more, I've seen a lot more, especially I feel like from Thailand, I've seen a lot lately of coming into the market. I think sites like Kickstarter have helped with reach for some of those projects. We've seen some interesting things come out. And I think also as some of these creators that are coming from Southeast Asia are putting their work out and then people are appreciating their work, more people are being open to exploring that area for creators. So I think that definitely is something I've been noticing in the market for sure. There was also a question, and I think I'm gonna throw this out there. So Fan of the Forest asks if your deck has a mass market edition. I don't think it does, but do you ever have any plans to take any of your editions of SKT to the mass market?
No. Yeah, it's
No.
either I'm going to produce it in the way that I've been making it, like small batches, one like this approach is the only way it's getting out into the world, or it's just
Yeah.
like DOA, like just dead in the water, just it's
Yeah.
not happening again. So
Yeah, I think that makes sense given what you've coded into it. I don't see how that would work on a mass market scale. You wouldn't be able to add that layer, and without that it's something different, in which case it's something else. Would you consider a different project at any point taking to mass market? And I'd be curious why or why
yeah,
not.
maybe. So for example, the Atea deck is going to be again same process, but because it's more fun, like it's more of a lighter deck. I don't think I'm going to do independent and then I'm going to mass market. So that's not what I'm going to do. But like maybe after I die or something, if it went mass market after my death, I'd probably be okay with it. But I don't think I would be
Yeah.
okay with the SKT going mass market after my death. I would want it to
Yeah.
go into the ground with me.
Yep. Yep. It has a
Yeah.
very specific vision and system around it and structure that just does it makes that make sense to me. So I follow that. Um, What is having done both independent self-publishing and mass market publishing, do you have any thoughts you're comfortable sharing about maybe the difference between those processes and why one might choose one over the other?
Oh yeah. So I think with traditional publishing, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I think you almost can't be taken seriously as a content creator or be invited to speak at conferences if you don't have something traditionally published. And that's an awful thing. I hate it, but it's one of those really ugly truths about our community and about the marketplace. And so if you are not traditionally published, people just don't take you as seriously. They just don't look at you the same, and that's a really awful thing that an awful commentary on us as a community and as an industry, but it's the current reality that you are working with, and so you need to know that upfront. But
Yeah.
you do lose a lot of say, even in terms of how you get it traditionally published. You almost, not that you self-censor, but you self like steer. You find yourself steering
Hmm.
your book. If you know this has to be traditionally published, you're going to steer in a certain way because it has to be palatable, it has to be this, has to be that. And then you make a lot of concessions in how the book is published or marketed. There's so many concessions that you have to make. There's a lot of things that are out there that people say is you, but it's not you because it's like a team of
Yeah.
people that put it together. And so you have to
Yeah.
kind of deal with that as well, where you get blamed for mistakes that really weren't your own, you know, and
Yeah.
you don't get
Yeah.
to hear your own voice in a lot of the things. Like a lot of it is no longer really you, and you kind of like, well, there's this book out there, but it's not 100% me. So there's that.
Yeah.
In independent publishing, you have full creative control, but for some people, that's really intimidating. For some people, that's really scary because you only get whatever guidance you give yourself. And so
Yeah.
there's that aspect of it. And then unless you do a fulfillment center or you hire people to help, you're doing everything yourself. And so the problem with that is not all of us are good at wearing all of the hats. And especially
Yes.
artists. Most artists are not business people. Most artists are really, really bad at customer service. And so I happen to have who does all my customer service for me, because I knew with the 2018 first edition of SKT, as an artist, I was really bad at business. Where like if somebody had a problem, well, well, F you too. Well, you can return the tarot deck. You don't have to own my tarot deck. Like just bring it back. You just send it back to me.
Yeah.
And so he was like, that is not how you treat your customers. He was like completely mortified. Like, who are you? What are you doing? Like you can't speak to people who gave you money like that. And it's true. He's 100% right. I'm 100% in the wrong, but you have to understand where artists come from. Artists take everything really, really personally. If you're like, I don't like this thing about your tarot deck, you basically said, I hate your face. Like you just basically told, like, right? Like it's like you just offended me to my core. I'm going to push back, right? And so of course you can't do that. You have to be able to separate, like all that is wrong, super wrong. No, do not think that way. But to get over that is really difficult for creators.
It is hard.
So it's really hard to be, and that's why you also see a lot of indie deck creators end up in hot water. Is because they end up in hot water, not because they're bad people. They just don't know how to negotiate the business aspect of things. Whereas somebody who
That's very true.
Yeah. So
I see a lot, especially through like being in like the reviewing aspect of TarotTube. You do see that a lot. And there are some creators that really shouldn't watch reviews of their work, truly. I thought I was going to be one of them, and for whatever reason, I don't care what you say. I don't know why. This is not me at all. I don't know how it works. As long as it's not a video, I could care. Like I'm excited about anything you say, good or bad, pretty much. So far. Don't hold me to that. But privately, that's where I have to take a breath. And so Peggy and I made a rule. She's like, if somebody sends you a message and you get offended, you're not allowed to respond. You have to show it to me first, and then we'll work it out. I haven't had that happen yet, but everybody's been really kind behind the scenes. But I was scared because I've seen some people who went through a Kickstarter, for example, and just got obliterated behind the scenes, people just being terrible in private emails. And I was so nervous, but I was very lucky. I didn't have anybody behave that way. But you're absolutely right that so many of us, we do this and we think we're supposed to be good at all of it. Well, I should be good at logistics, and I should be good at planning, and I should be good at finance, and I should be good at accounting, and I should also be good at customer service and marketing. And no, most of us aren't good at all of those things. So for me, it was like, what things do I need to offload? What things do I want to get other people's perspective on to make sure I don't screw it up? Who do I need to ask questions of? But that is the most daunting thing about indie creation. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, and I'm guessing because I still don't actually have hard data to report on, but my guess at this moment is also that there's a misconception that mass market publishing or traditional publishing is more lucrative than independent publishing. Again, I do not have data, but my expectation is that's very, very much not true. Does that bear up?
100%. It is a lot more lucrative to self-publish than it is to go mass market. The mass market, you don't make any money because if you
don't do it for money,
you can not the way the business model is set up. The deck creator is the last one to get paid.
Yeah. And this makes sense to me in a way, maybe because I've had other businesses where, like as a yoga teacher, for example, the studio has to have all of the overhead and all of the costs to host this teacher to come in. And so it doesn't, I think the average person consuming any kind of content, whether it be a book or anything, they assume that the person who created that thing is getting the biggest piece of the pie. But there's so many layers of logistics and other people that have to get paid that makes that just impractical at the end of the day. The more hands in the pot, the more hands that need to get taken care of, the more overhead, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's a really interesting thing that not a lot of people realize or think about.
Yeah, the only exception is if you're extremely popular, like household name level popular, then a mass market production that you put out there is going to be lucrative. Obviously, there's no question there. But then at the same time, if you think about that, the like nut to nut, then independently published, you'd be making even more money, right? And so if you do it all things equal, independently published it would be much, much more lucrative than the mass market. But that's the only example where it would even be within the scope of the definition of lucrative. You're really not doing it for the
Yeah.
most of us, most of the people who you know who are traditionally published tarot deck creators and tarot authors or just Llewellyn authors, really, I don't even know if they can pay like their electric bill with it. You know, it's really more about
Yeah.
having that established, you know, your resume, you know, it's really to establish yourself, establish your platform so that you can do more things, that other things that are going to be lucrative.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of how I see it. For me, it was this weird fangirl moment. Like this was just something I said I was going to do someday kind of thing. But it's not, I don't think there's anything I do where that's the end goal. And I think sometimes that's what kills creativity too, is if you're and again, this is coming from a privileged place of not needing to do it for that reason. But I think that it can get in the way if you're trying to, like you said, pay your bills with something or make a certain amount of money. Again, even whether indie or mass market, it can be kind of debilitating
Mhm.
because when you really nuts and bolts it at the end of the day, by the time everything's been paid for, tax man, even indie, like there's really not, it's really we're not out here you know, rolling in anything.
Right.
But I think sometimes that focus can throw you off if you try too hard to move in that direction. At least that's been what I've sort of observed is that seems like that's what will stop people. And that's a shame. It's a
Yeah.
shame. Yeah. Spiralight Tarot says, do you still have family in Taiwan and do you visit them? What's your favorite part of the country?
A lot. I mean, like all my family is in Taiwan. Like because both my mom and my dad have a ton of brothers and sisters, and so they're all there, and they all have so I have a bunch of cousins. So I have a lot of family in Taiwan. I have not visited them since before COVID. I used to go every 2 or 3 years, and so like every
Yeah.
2 or 3 years, I would be in Taiwan for at least 2 weeks to visit to do a tour of the island, all of that. But I haven't been back. And then the COVID hit. And then after COVID, it was really hard to go over to Asia. And then even if you couldn't even go because if you went to Asia, you didn't know if you could come back. And so it was really,
Oh,
yeah. And so it was just like no one wanted to take the risk. If you had to come back to the US, then you didn't want to go to Asia because you couldn't be stuck there. What am I going to do with work? Right. And so
yeah.
since then I haven't traveled there, unfortunately. My husband and my father-in-law, because my father-in-law lives with us, they've been to China. So they've visited mainland China, not Taiwan, but they've been back to Asia. I just haven't yet, unfortunately. My favorite part of Taiwan or the United States? Oh, favorite part of Taiwan, I assume. My favorite part of
Yeah,
the
I think so.
country. My favorite part of the country of Taiwan would be like the religion, like the religions. I think I
Mm,
heard there was a statistic somewhere that like 90% of the country of the island believes in ghosts, gods, and spirits. And it's really true. Like you really feel it. And I think there's different like Hawaii has that too. I noticed there are certain parts of the world where you go there and you're like, "Oh, I get it. I get why people
yeah.
believe in spirits because it's just very vibrant. Like the spirit activity is very, very like active,
Rich and like
vibrant, right?
present.
And it's very, very present. You can't like go with street without feeling they're around you. And so Taiwan for me has that, especially the southern part. So it just feels easy to be a spirit medium there. Whereas sometimes here it can kind of feel crickets because the space is so vast. The United States is much bigger. And so and then a lot of it has been so urbanized that you've stamped out that spirit
Yeah.
culture. And so there you still feel it.
Oh, that's amazing. I haven't really been I'm not very well traveled, like at all. Um, but I've heard from whenever I hear from somebody who's been to, I'll give Hawaii as an example because that's the most relatable to me personally. They'll come back and be like, it's just different there. It just feels different. The energy feels different. The pace feels different. It smells different. Like just things that like I don't think about as somebody who's been in urban places my whole life that I don't other than being like in the woods, I can feel that in like a small way. But never to that degree. That's very, very cool. Would you be comfortable sharing your sun, moon, and rising, just for any astrology nerds out there?
Sun Libra, Moon Leo, Aquarius rising.
Sun, Sun Libra?
Libra, yeah, I'm a Libra sun, Leo moon,
Nice.
and then Aquarius
Okay.
rising. I don't know if I match that or if I
Ah,
don't match that though. Some
I
people,
would have no idea, but I know there's always some astrology nerds who know what that means. I've got like this much astrology, colloquial that I can like understand, but I am Cancer Sun, Gemini Moon, Libra rising.
Ah.
And like I always like, does that mean anything? I don't know. Maybe it does. Although I do know that I always have considered myself a watery person. And then when I actually looked at my chart, I've got a lot of air and suddenly so many things made sense. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. I get it. Um, I wanted to actually circle over to community a little bit. And specifically, I think the community that we have here on TarotTube and sort of how you feel about that, what your experience has been like. And then also what that maybe how that differs or is the same as more in-person community things that you've experienced. Where do you see, harmony and disconnect?
So what's okay, the tarot community, the first thing I wanted to say about that is like we have it really good. I
Yeah.
complained and bitched a lot and criticized the tarot online community so much when I was like immersed in it. I was like, oh, we're this,
Yeah.
we're that, we're this, we're that. And then like I kind of entered the greater magical community, especially when I started making a lot more videos on Taoism and seeing sort of like not riffraff, but like seeing the like wild west that can become in terms of your comments section and things that people say about you. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I miss my tarot community. We're so good. We're so kind. We're
We're
so
so wholesome.
lovely. We're so innocent. Like we're such an innocent and naive, sweet bunch, And so I really can't complain. So after seeing like what's really out there in like the
Yeah.
big pond, I'm like, this small pond, actually, we really shouldn't bitch. We're actually really, really good
Yeah.
people. So
We
like
have a
I have
great
a
little small
different
pond. Love our
right,
small
like
pond.
we're
I love
actually
it so
really good
much.
people. We're not bad people at
Yeah.
all. So, but I didn't realize that until I left. And then I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But I think it's also changed a lot. Like I feel like before I
Yeah.
knew everybody, like anybody, like I knew all the names, I knew everybody, I knew what was, and it was easy to keep up with what everybody was doing. I felt like
Yeah.
I didn't have to try really hard to know what everybody was up to. I don't even know how I knew. I just knew because I think maybe we're also a
Yeah.
very gossipy bunch. I don't know. But like I always knew what
Probably.
everybody was up to. And now I know nothing.
Yeah.
I have no
Yeah.
idea what
Same.
everybody is like in their own little like pockets or enclaves or I don't even know what, but like I just feel like I don't know what's up anymore. I'm like completely out of touch with what's happening unless I actively go seek out that information. So I kind of
Yeah.
miss the intimacy of of TarotTube and how intimate TarotTube used to be. I think I don't know what's happened there, but I feel like something happened in the last couple of years and it kind of fragmented a little bit. Maybe we need a
Yeah.
soul retrieval ritual for the community.
Maybe. There's definitely been, I think, some fragmentation. I think there's also been some I think there's the natural consequence of, and I don't think this is a bad thing, but I think as tarot has become more accessible and dare I say mainstream, I hate that word, but like as it's spread more, I feel like we have more voices. And I agree. It used to be where I felt like my watch list, because I tried to watch everybody, and I still kind of try to watch everybody. Like TarotTube is like my main form of entertainment to this day. Like I watch so much TarotTube, but even still, I feel like I'm only dipping a toe in the bucket, and I feel like I watch a lot and try to be connected. But I think some of it is that we have a lot of voices, which is amazing, but that sense of where kind of everybody knew each other has definitely shifted. It's interesting because I don't know, it's funny when I came on TarotTube in the beginning because I felt like I sort of knew everybody and it was like less scary. And I imagine for people thinking of starting a channel now, it's almost like more intimidating because it feels like such a bigger, we're still a small pond, but we're a bigger small pond in a way, like maybe a wider small pond than we used to be. And maybe it's harder to find that sort of like little community that feels right. I try to create a space like that here. We try to build that, around small groups, but it's not quite the same. How does that compare to what you've experienced, like going to conferences and being out in like, because I feel like you've had more of that experience than I have for sure, of being out in like in-person community and what feels different about that?
I think before, like from maybe the early 2000s to around 2015, maybe even to 2018, I think definitely way like hard pre-COVID. I
Yeah,
feel like everyone knew each other, and then we were an in-person group of friends that lived in
yeah,
different parts of the world, so we had to use the internet to stay connected. right?
Ah,
Like it's
yes.
very different, right? And so
Yeah.
and then we had these wonderful reunions. Oh, we can finally see each other again in person. And then when we have to go back
Yeah.
home, the way we stayed in touch was through the internet to stay up to date on what we're doing in terms of tarot fun things is tarot community online. But then
Yeah.
I think something happened where like the community itself actually went virtual. Like it became the community was on the internet. And then you
Yes.
had the internet community and then you had the in-person community. And slowly, year by year, they became different groups of people. And so you had like
Yeah.
online personalities that didn't go to the conferences. And then you had conference
Yeah.
people who had no idea what the hell was happening on TarotTube, you know? And they kind
Yeah.
of like went farther and farther apart. And then now it's not just TarotTube. There's like I haven't even gone into TikTok, but now there's like TikTok tarot stars,
Oh,
and
TikTok
there's so
overwhelms
much
me.
happening that I'm already overwhelmed, you know, from TarotTube, and so now it's even
Yeah.
farther apart, and so now we are left with this question of what's going to happen to tarot conferences. I
Next.
think we're kind of going through
Yeah.
growing pains. You're seeing that this year, Reader Studio is not happening this year, and
I just saw that.
right, yeah, and so there's like a lot of things that are I think happening now that it's getting a little bit more difficult, and I think it's a good question. It's a really good question of what's
Like,
next
where are we
for tarot
going? Yeah,
conferences.
what is this going to look like? It's I feel like and this came up, when Danny and Dawn and I, when we were together in Florida, we went live and we had some interesting conversations around this and like, what is the future of conferences look like? Is it by necessity time for that world to evolve in some way to pull more people into that space? Or what does that look like if so? it, it's holding a different purpose, it seems like now than it used to be. I think that for me, it's really interesting because I went to my very first conference ever in I think it was 2018.
Mhm.
And so it was the very tail end of that sort of pre-COVID. And I presented in 2019. So I went for the first time in 2018, presented in 2019. And both of those events felt really magical to me, but they were in at the cusp of change. And so I kind of came in at the tail end when like I didn't know anybody, but like when I walked in, it felt like that a little bit of the tail end of everybody was sort of having this reunion. I didn't really have a chance to build connections in a way that felt that way at that point, but I saw that happening all around me and it was very like cozy and sort of heartwarming. But even though there was a lot of people, I felt like the event was quite big. And now when you see how it shifted post COVID, and I wonder how much COVID has just in general been the reason so much has changed. But now you see it and it's kind of like it feels like they're all shrunk and it feels dramatic as a change to me, having gone 2019 and now looking forward to what just the last 365 days of conference events has looked like. It just feels like night and day, completely different. So it feels now like almost like we're experiencing a tower-like event in the conference circuit.
I think
You know,
another like I mean people live and die. The cycle of life happens no matter what, and we're certainly not the first to experience this. But I guess for me, in my lifetime at least, it's the first time I've personally experienced it, which is a lot of people are dying. Like a lot of people are
aging out,
gone,
truly.
like so there's a lot of
Yeah,
people that were always they headline these conferences, they were the big names, or even just like fixtures. They always showed
anchors.
up. They were anchors in the
Yeah,
community. And even though they maybe
yeah,
didn't publish a tarot book, they always were there at the conferences. And then you just get
yeah,
news that they've passed on. And so
yeah.
I mean, like when I remember what it was like a couple of years ago, I went to a conference and looked around and remember thinking, oh, this person, this person, this person, this person are no longer with us. And
Oh,
just having like that, like it really sinks in because if you go to these events year after year and every year they're there and you're joking with them, you're making fun of each other, you're teasing each other, and then all of a sudden they're
yeah,
no longer there, and you realize they're not there because they've moved on. And it's like
yeah,
and more people. It's not just one person, but a lot of, so it's just, and a lot of people are getting older, like the people who used to be the young ones that were the butt end of controversy because they were young, fresh, new voices in our community are now like the elders in our community.
which is wild to me. It's really strange. I was just sitting around looking at my subscription list. Like, who were the people that like I looked to when I was first starting? And so many of those people aren't even creating content anymore,
Mhm.
or it's completely shifted. And I'm like, And then it was kind of this wake up moment of, oh my gosh, everything has changed. I mean, I know I've changed too, but it feels like everything's changed around me. Like I've been picked up and plunked into a different world in a way. And it begs the question, I think when we think about conferences, especially going, and you recognize that it feels like the same people that were attending conferences are still the people attending conferences. But because, as you said, we are losing people, it's shrinking.
Hmm.
But
Like literally shrinking.
where's the new influx of, like, I guess new blood or like
Hmm.
new people coming to revitalize this world? And is that needed? And if so, like, in what ways does it need to change is the question I'm asking myself, because with virtual environments making things easier, virtual conferences, and it's just easier to access this knowledge, this shared knowledge. We make content for each other on YouTube. So where's the value add then when you go other than that in-person connection? And in a increasingly online world, how do we meet that change in society with some sort of rebirth of conference type something that can revitalize it? I don't know. I've had so many questions in my brain and solutions for nothing, but I'm curious where it's headed.
That's a really great question. And also, I think the reason right now might be unique is because I don't know what the answer is in terms of because there's different skill sets. So things
Yeah.
don't translate back and forth. So I've noticed in very recent years at this cusp that we're on, a lot of people who, back in the day, right? A lot of people who present really well and are very charismatic presenters in person, it doesn't translate on the internet. Like they don't really make it
Mm,
on social media, it doesn't translate over. And it's the
yeah.
same vice versa, where you see these charismatic personalities on social media, you're like, oh, they're going to be great at conferences, and they're just not. They don't know how
Yeah.
to work a room because maybe they're from a generation where they've never had to work a room. They don't know how to do public
Yeah.
speaking in person. And so their
Yeah.
social media personality, that charisma doesn't translate in a room full of
Doesn't cross over.
elders, because most of the people, let's be real here, most of the people at these conferences are a little bit older. And so I've noticed
Yeah.
that. So what are you going to do with that disconnect? Where like there's
Yeah.
a huge disconnect now with that too, where there's people with completely different skill sets don't translate over with one another. So I don't know.
Well, it's frankly, like, if I'm being honest, it's much easier to be present in an online space than it is in a conference space. It's much more intimidating. You've got real people, and not that you all aren't real. I hope you understand what I mean, but like we're all real, but you have that 3D like interaction of body language interaction, and some people are smiling, some people aren't. You can't always read other people's reactions to what you're presenting. And I'm very much one to sort of like when I present, I'm very much about like engaging with people. But I also had the good fortune of having presented for multiple reasons over many years before tarot. So I had opportunities to figure out what I didn't like and what worked for me as a presentation style and all this kind of thing. I'm still very casual in my approach, but I've learned what that feels like, and I know what to expect when I go into it. And to your point, I think a lot of people who create content online, we're used to not having to gauge the response to our content in the immediate moment. Even in a live stream, if you all are flipping me the bird right now, I have no idea. I am blissfully unaware, and I don't have to picture anybody in their underwear because I'm not nervous the same way. You know what I mean? So it's kind of that whole thing of it's a whole different vibe. And yeah, Barb did bring up that we did talk about this a lot about the cost, the barrier to entry for conferences is high. You travel, you've got airfare, you've got hotel or accommodation, food, and ticket prices. And it's, I think, easy to look at those numbers and go, okay, I can do all of this to meet
And
these
go on
people in person.
vacation.
Yeah. Or, yeah, exactly. Or I can just go online and
Oh,
connect
or
and
that,
learn
yeah.
that way. And I think sometimes there's that disconnect between the two levels of value, which I mentioned to you personally, just that concern about like, how do we address this problem without devaluing? Like, this content is valuable, it has a value, and we don't want to undermine that value. And yet at the same time, we want to make it easier for the younger generation or for new people to want to go to these events, to make it more accessible, and it's not inexpensive to put events on. So there's like all these barriers, it feels like, to changing the conference world to allow for that transition.
But you know what's interesting? Like maybe it's just because of numbers and we can't replicate it. But like, for example, Comic-Con there
Yeah.
are conferences that attract a lot of young blood, and they're doing very, very well, and they don't have this problem. You know what I
But you
mean?
know what the difference is, I think, when you think of Comic-Con and you think of Fan Expo and you think of these events, their their draw is the personalities. And their draw is not education. Nobody's going to school at Comic-Con.
Mhm. True.
When you think about it, at tarot events, the emphasis has always been, and I think this is so amazing about it, but has always been on the education, on tarot geekery. We get to go geek out together about tarot and divination, and that's amazing. It's information sharing, it's wisdom sharing, it's so valuable. But it doesn't have the enticement of what draws people to those things is fun and engagement. Danny and Don and I all were talking. We were like, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing to just like have a tarot party? To just go like somebody host a party. Let's bring it back to the social element somehow. Make it, like you said, a vacation where people
Mhm.
feel like they're going for something fun. But
Tarot
again, that
cruise.
somebody wanting to, yeah, like exactly, like
We just
a
eat
tarot
together. That's all we
cruise.
do.
Yeah, Danny broached like, oh gosh, we could do like a tarot Mardi Gras type event, like a tarot ball. And like, what would that be like to do that kind of an event? And it's that kind of thing. It's like we need a fresh take. I almost feel like on conferences and what that could look like. I'm not volunteering. I have too much on my plate. But you know what I mean? It's like it's really easy again for me to sit on the sidelines and be like, here's what we could try different. But for sure, I think that the emphasis, yes, Tarot Cat, it's on the vending, it's on the variety, it's on the people you get to go see, but we don't function on fame in the tarot community, and I don't want us to either. So that's not doesn't feel like the solution. So then, but yeah, something like that, like a tarot cruise or some kind of social event that I think
Me
that
and
the
Blood
magic
Girl
that
were
everybody
thinking
tells.
like, sorry.
Yeah, I know, right? Because it's kind of like when you think about it, what everybody says or what everybody's told me about what it was like back in the day was that it felt like a reunion. And yes, we were at, I say we, I was not there, but like people describe it as like, yes, getting together and information sharing. But the thing that drew you all together seems to be more like you said, these were people you had real connections with and you wanted to just get together again. You wanted to see each other again. And I think over time, maybe because we're trying to create value in content, we miss that other part. Yeah.
That's
And yeah,
actually a
Tarot Cat True.
great that's a great point though. So, I was thinking about that as well, like in terms of what you present. Well, like what is the purpose of a
Yeah.
tarot conference?
Yeah.
So I feel like when internet wasn't as big, or when you didn't go to the internet to learn tarot, and there wasn't as much
Yeah.
educational content on tarot online, these in-person conferences, you did legitimately go there to learn because you didn't have access
Yeah.
to other information. Where else are you going to find a subject matter expert to teach you about tarot and Kabbalah? But now
Exactly.
it's like all over the internet. And so I think the way we learn tarot has changed. Before, you really did like legitimately go to these conferences to learn and study the tarot in ways that you really didn't have access to in your own small town. Whereas
Yeah.
now anybody from anywhere can go online and learn whatever you want to learn. It's just a matter of will. So now you're
Yeah.
left with, what do you do at the tarot conference? If you still want to continue the tarot conference, it has to be an experience, right? And so you have to really add more magic into it. But that brings its
Yeah.
own like drama and problems and issues as well. So like
It
how do you
does.
negotiate and navigate this? Having the party is going to be a lot of fun. But I already like, we're a gossipy, dramatic bunch too. And so I'd love to see how that
No,
works
just
out.
it's
Engage
just
everyone
invite
before
all
you
this like
start.
social drama. I
We
could
are
just
a very
imagine.
dramatic, we're a very melodramatic bunch.
No, it's totally true. But it is funny, and it is the thing that I feel like when I think of the 2018, 2019 conferences that to me were so vibrant, that was the one thing is like I feel like there was spaces to mingle. There
Mhm.
was a lot of emphasis on maybe not even an emphasis, but it felt like there was meeting places kind of baked into the. So that's something else, maybe just thinking about how they evolve. Because I notice when I go now, it's like the younger people just don't seem to be coming to the
Mhm.
conferences. It seems to be a generational gap. So how do we
Yeah.
meet that generational gap? It's just interesting to me because I feel like I got to it so late and missed out on so much that now I see it evolving and I'm like, no, 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 I'm not ready. Like I want to have the experience y'all had. But yeah, I think I keep thinking of like smaller local events. I was, as a member of a particular sub community of queer culture in Seattle, we had like a big like online community. And what would happen is little pockets, it became a thing where we would create themed events, but everybody would sort of take up the mantle and host smaller local events in their communities for people. And we were still all part of this greater like community, but it felt like anybody was allowed, if that makes sense, to and
Yeah.
encouraged to create a small community event. And somebody mentioned that in the comments to our live chat. It was on Don Michelle's channel. Somebody mentioned in the comments about how we need, I'm forgetting. I think it was Bohemian Rose Tarot said something about we need like almost like chapters, like small, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like to
yeah.
have like a larger thing where it's not for profit, but there's small chapters kind of putting together small local events. Because I think now that may be the difference is that there's enough of us now, maybe, that instead of all trying to concentrate in one location, which is only going to be affordable for some, to maybe find ways to build in our local areas. And maybe we all just need to get braver, myself included, about hosting smaller local things, tarot meetup and trade, a gathering at a park, something to start to maybe create it as more vibrant, right?
We
I
did
don't know.
well. Some of our friends, some of the local San Francisco Bay Area people, we did do that. So that has been fun. And so we did it a couple of times, and it was fantastic. And now it's more like, oh, no one has the time, so it's a matter of trying to get everyone's schedule in sync to do it, and finding somebody with a
Yeah.
house that can, host a bigger crowd than just 10. So yeah. But
Yeah,
we've
or
been
has an
doing that
event
in the Bay
space or
Area.
something.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So let's wrap up with just a couple last questions from the group. If you guys have anything you haven't spit it out yet and you really want to have a burning question, now's the time. I've got a couple saved up. So let's start with Fairlight Tarot asks, do you have a habit when reading tarot? So do you knock on a deck? Do you store the deck with the backups or shuffle a certain number of times? Do you have like a method that you always use when you're reading tarot cards?
Maybe not always, but almost always. I like to start with the opening of the key for opening of the four worlds. So I shuffle, and then you do the YHVH, and then you have the four piles, and then you go and look for the significator card, and then which card pile kind of gives you direction for the tenor of the divination and where to go from there. And usually from there, I take it step by step. Usually I do a variation on that whole opening of the key based on whatever happened during the opening of the four worlds. So that's the most go-to reading habit I can think of, because I almost always do readings with that first cutting of the four worlds.
I have to revisit that because I don't know that I made the connection to that. I remember watching it. I think you did it in a series of videos when you rolled out Spirit Keepers First Edition, where you showed that, if I'm remembering right.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I have to look that up. I'm super curious about that.
That would make
And
sense.
Jenny asks, yeah. What is your favorite quote right now? Oh, good luck. I can't do this out of my brain, but if you can, more power to you. May the odds be ever in your favor. But do you have a favorite movie quote or book quote or song quote, lyric?
I don't know if it's my favorite, but the one that always kind of gets a chuckle out of me. I'm not going to be able to restate it correctly, but it's an old, I think, it's an old Zhuangzi proverb, which is like a thief, an everyday person steals a dagger and gets the death sentence. But if you steal a kingdom, then if you steal a kingdom and you're made king. But if you steal a dagger,
Oh,
you're put to death. And I was like, you said
interesting.
that 3,000 years ago, and that's so true today. Like, that's kind of, and so I was just like, oh, I don't know. That's what I came up with.
I love that. That's perfect. Okay, final question. Melissa asks, is there a question you get tired of answering or of being asked? This is such a good one. Thank you for asking it. This is a good one. If you
There's
feel comfortable
quite a
answering.
few, but I think the one, and I'm probably,
No, all
is
good.
X cultural appropriation? Or what do you think of cultural appropriation? Like, that's the question that I'm just
Oh,
like, there's
oh,
no
I don't want to
answer to
answer that.
that question. And like, I'm asked it all the time. Like, it's always asked
Yeah,
of me. And so that's the question that I get tired of. Like, go
that's
figure it out
valid.
yourself. Why are you asking me? Who am I? Like, I'm not a
Yeah,
subject matter
like
expert on cultural
I'm not the
appropriation.
expert. Yeah, no, that's definitely something that takes a lot of, I think, introspection and looking into yourself. What was your suggestion, babe? Was being asked to be on people's live streams. Yeah, what do you think? She said maybe your answer is being asked to be on people's live streams.
I don't mind live streams, actually. They're pretty fun.
No, that's good.
Crappy joke attacking my wife.
Yeah, she said it's just a crappy joke
Oh.
To attack you.
to attack me. She's not trying to attack you. Yeah.
It's to other people. It's you.
Just me. She just likes to pick on me. That's the
My
punchline.
job.
Yeah. So I would say, like, if there was, or I guess I would ask if there's one thing that gives you pause when you decide to make a YouTube video, what's the one thing that holds you back, if anything?
Oh, so it changed after I started making less tarot content, because I think our community is real. Again, like I said, we don't know how good we have it. We have such a beautiful community. I think when my audience got much bigger to people who are not from the tarot world, I think what gives me a lot of pause is, will this attract more creepy people that could potentially stalk me that I would have to call the police for?
Ew, yeah, that's
So,
scary.
yeah, and so now I'm just very like mindful of the content that I put out there, because
Yeah,
I find that even when I don't think it should attract weirdos, it does. Because
it
for some
does.
reason,
Yeah,
like the occult magical community does attract a lot of, I don't even know what the right word is, And so I think that gives me a lot of pause all of the time. And so
yeah,
I'm on a content creating freeze right now because of that. And so
yeah.
that's
It's
the
like trying to
one.
find how to make content that you want to make without attracting the people you don't want to attract. That is tricky.
When I was only doing tarot, my content, you know how you have that tarot, that analytics in the YouTube function, and then you have it on your blog as well. So it was like 90% female, like women, and then only 2 or 3% men. And I felt like I actually had a pretty positive experience on TarotTube. And then it switched recently to 80 to 90% male and only under 5% female. And after the gender switched in terms of my analytics, the tenor of like, it just, a lot of things changed.
The tone of the comments completely changed. So did you experience then? Sorry, I know I said last question like 5 minutes ago, and again, wave the white flag if you need to, but
it's all good.
Okay, so I just have a question, because I guess I don't really look at analytics that closely. I do know about the spread that's typically mostly women, but did you experience when you shifted your content, again, less tarot, more occult magic, did you experience like an explosion or a big burst of channel growth in numbers?
I did, yeah. I did. So for example, I was at a good strong 10K, 15K for 6-7 years. That's it.
Wow.
And then I started doing more Taoist mysticism content and more into Western occultism and ceremonial magic as well. And then you can actually track it somewhere. And then it spiked and spiked and spiked and spiked and spiked. And then it jumped within a couple of years.
Whoa.
And then in those
like 50 or something now, right?
Yeah, and it changed, and all of that happened in just a very, very short amount of time. So I got half of it over the span of 7 years, and then the other half of the audience is all spiked within like 1 or 2 years. So that gives you a sense of the acceleration. And then during that acceleration, the audience itself, demographics changed dramatically as well. And so then, I think the change happened to my experience online faster than I could prepare for. So like if you're online, because I couldn't prepare for that immediate, like it felt overnight. To me, it almost felt overnight. And so
that seems overnight to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like your email inbox,
to be
everything, it just gets really, really frightening. Like I don't check my email now. So one thing that happens is I miss a lot of my friends' emails to my Benebell account because James checks all my emails now. And I can't read my own emails because you do get a lot of really scary stuff.
Wild stuff, scary stuff.
Yeah.
That would be really jarring to go through. Like one of the things I say is that, and Danny and Don and I, again, we talk a lot. So we talk about this kind of thing a lot in that, and mention this even in our recent live stream, but we feel as though it's like you start out and you're talking to a camera, like on YouTube, and then eventually start talking to like people, and then eventually you feel like you're talking to friends.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that, and then to, in a way, have that taken from you.
Yes, it was taken away. Yeah.
That would be really difficult. I would have a hard time making content if I experienced that big of a shift in demographic. Because for it to change that, to flip upside down like that has to be almost a complete overwhelming jump of new people in a new community, in a whole new way of interacting. That's really challenging. Have you ever considered starting like a second smaller channel to kind of recapture? Is that like an overthink? Like, but to try to recapture that feeling? Do you ever miss it? Just
I've thought about that, but would that even work? Like, I don't like, because
I
the thing is,
know.
I'm creating content that I want, right? Like, I'm
I
always,
know.
so it's whatever you're interested in. And so when I was interested in just talking about the tarot, it was what it was. And then if I'm interested in talking about what I'm currently doing and what my current interests are, like, I can't help who else is interested in that topic.
That's true. You got to create the content that you're driven to create, that is your interest at the moment. So
Right.
yeah, I guess not. You just be attracting the same people at a smaller channel, which gives you less control. And yeah, so maybe not. But like, man, and like Barb said, that's why membership is so good. I will say having a member space has been transformative for my experience online. Creating more of that intimate feel. Like we have a monthly self-worth chat at my highest tier of my membership, which I created solely so that we could have that safe space, that sort of connecting space that feels a lot more intimate. And it really has given me a beautiful balance of being able to make all the content that I want to make and still have a sort of anchor of this smaller community to just hang out and be with each other and cultivate that sort of community around the space. It's really been anchoring. But again, if you were to try to create something like that now in your existing demographic base, you would just be creating a smaller bubble of the same demographic mix, which probably might not solve that problem.
Yeah.
So there's that for sure. Oh my gosh, Benebell, I could talk to you all night, but thank you so much. You've been so generous with your
So
time,
much
and I know this
fun,
was a long
right?
day for you.
Oh, I loved it. Oh, no. This is a great way to spend my Friday. I would not spend my Friday any other way. Because it's either this or I have to go work on my PowerPoints. So I'm loving this a lot more.
Oh no,
than
we put
working
that
on
off.
PowerPoint.
My vote is after this. You find a really great show. Do you watch like cartoons, anime? Do you watch great cheesy movies, B-grade horror films? Anything we should know that's like your favorite entertainment for like turning your brain off? Do you turn your brain off?
Well, I like watching The Resident is a TV show that I kind of watch when I if I'm just wanting to waste time, or like if I'm doing something mindless, like for example, peeling fruit or like having to do something or like kneading dough, I'll play The Resident because I don't have to think, but you can kind of like have it in the background.
Have it in the background. Oh, well, that's good. Maybe get yourself some of that. Give yourself a breather from PowerPoint for a minute.
No, I'm behind, Lisa. I'm so behind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have to go work on my PowerPoint.
I gotta go get back to work.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Everybody in chat, thank you so much. For those of you who watch back later, please do feel free to leave your comments down below if you have extra questions. And if we can pin down Benebell for another one of these in the future, we definitely will do that. And I hope to do this again. I have a couple of creators I've been chatting with. We will be having more of these cozy creator chats, so keep your eyes out for those. And again, Benebell, thank you so much. All of Benebell's contact information will, when the replay is up, be available for you down below. But obviously, Benebell Wen, your website is benebellwen.com, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Easy. There we go. benebellwen.com. And then very easy to find here on YouTube as well. So I will have you tagged in all your socials down below as well. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to see amazing food, follow on Instagram for sure. Always all the fun food pics. All right. Thank you all, everybody. And we will talk to you later. Bye.